Stop building boring portfolios. No, seriously. If your portfolio still starts with, "Hi, I'm blank," and there's an image on the right, we need to talk. Because the world really doesn't need another polite portfolio quietly whispering, "Here are my projects, please consider me." That version of you is invisible. Recruiters scroll. They forget. They move on to the next developer who copy-pasted a template and vibe-coded a personality-free website. Zero creativity, zero identity, zero impact. But that's not you. Not today. Hi there, I'm Adrian, and welcome to the portfolio of the 21st century. A portfolio so bold, so interactive, so unignorable that the first time someone sees it, they'll swear their laptop just booted a brand new operating system.
Hold up. Wait a minute.
Wait, what? Yes, your new portfolio is a macOS-inspired desktop environment. A portfolio that doesn't look like a website. It behaves like an actual OS. And here's what you're about to build. A fully interactive macOS-like desktop. Smooth animated welcome experience. A magnifying dock with real physics. A full Finder clone. A Safari window for your blog. A Photos app. A Contact app. A terminal for displaying your tech stack. A resume viewer with a download button. True-to-life draggable windows. And GSAP-powered animations that feel premium and alive. Let that sink in. A desktop, apps, animations. You're building an entire operating system that doubles as your portfolio. And this isn't just about being flashy. It's about becoming the kind of developer who actually stands out. Because while building this, you'll learn React fundamentals and advanced patterns, Tailwind CSS, Zustand, Immer, GSAP, higher order components, and clean UI engineering principles that separate juniors from seniors. By the end, you won't just have a portfolio. You'll have a signature piece, a career weapon, if you will. And if you want to go even further and master advanced GSAP patterns and real product level motion, the Ultimate Web Animation course goes deep into everything I use here. Or if you want to skip the setup and jump straight into building, I prepared a complete starter kit for you. Not a templated clone, a real extendable foundation that goes beyond just what this course teaches. It includes a dark mode, a mobile interface, modular components, app systems, and a professional README. And if you want to go beyond just looking good and actually get interviews, I prepared a hiring-ready resume, case study templates, and step-by-step guides to make your LinkedIn and GitHub stand out. It's how you'll present yourself like a real candidate in a crowded market. Grab it from the description below. It'll save you weeks and give you a system you can grow with. All right, you know the features, you know the skills and the tools. You know exactly what you're about to build. So whether you're following along from scratch or you use the starter kit, what matters is you walk away with something that feels yours. Something unforgettable. Something that finally shows the world what you're capable of. Let's build your new portfolio. And since my goal is to make sure you land a job, this portfolio is not just a regular project. It's a career asset designed to showcase everything you're capable of, making you an attractive candidate for any job. See, hosting your website on a personalized domain makes you more professional and improves your credibility. It also highlights your skill in self-hosting, scaling, and managing websites. So before we dive into the code, we need to set the foundation. I highly recommend Hostinger for hosting this app. And they're offering an amazing deal right now because there's a huge Black Friday sale going on. So click the Hostinger link in the description and then click Start Now. When it comes to hosting this app, I'll personally go with the premium plan. It allows you to host 3 websites with the same account. It comes with 20 gigs of SSD storage. You get a free domain for 1 year and free SSL for HTTPS security, which builds trust with anybody visiting your site. This deal won't last forever, and because I've partnered with Hostinger, you'll get an even bigger discount. So click the link in the description, start now, and choose a plan. Here, we have to choose the period of our hosting, and with the amazing deal going on right now, I'll choose 48 months to save the most. If you already know the domain name you want to get with the hosting, you can type it out right here, or you can do that later. And most importantly, here's that additional coupon code that I promised. Just type in JavaScript Mastery, and you'll get an even bigger discount on your hosting package. You can now continue, and very soon, we'll start developing our app. And as soon as you buy it, you'll be redirected to Hostinger's guided setup. In this case, we're creating a new website. We're not using any kind of a builder. Rather, we want to start with an empty HTML website. And if you bought 12 months or more, you've also gotten a free domain name. So in this case, choose what would suit you. I'll go with something like mymacOSportfolio.com. I'll leave better domain names for you. And then click Next. Or if you don't yet know which domain name you want to choose, you can use a temporary domain name for now. But I recommend just putting a combination of your last and first name. And that's it. Our domain is getting registered. It'll ask you where your target audience is located. You can choose anything here. I'll go with United States. And while our hosting is being set up, I just wanted to quickly let you know that if you want to skip all the trial and error while trying to build out this portfolio, you can get the full source code below, just fix up your details, and then still follow along with the video, but this time trying to better understand how the codebase really works. Now that our hosting has been set up, at the end of the video, we'll simply deploy our code using the file manager. And before we dive right into the code, one quick thing. Since my goal is to help you not just build projects, but actually grow your developer career, I want to remind you why I built JS Mastery Pro in the first place. It's designed to help smart and ambitious developers like you stay consistent with your learning, get real-world results, and finally feel confident applying for jobs. And if you've been thinking about joining, now's the best time, as our Black Friday sale goes live on the 25th. Every course, bundle, and membership will be 25% off, and that stacks on top of the already huge PPP discount. But heads up, the deal only lasts until December 2nd, so mark your calendar. All right, now let's really dive into the code. Ready to make your portfolio? Let's get started. First, open up your code editor or IDE and create a new folder called macOS Portfolio. Throughout the course, you'll see me use WebStorm. It is a professional IDE that as of recently became completely free for non-commercial use. I'll put a link down in the description so you can download it. And since I know you'll be asking which theme I'm using, it's Katpuchin Mocha. Now, WebStorm also comes paired with Junie, a smart coding agent. Throughout this course, we'll use it a couple of times to help us develop some pieces of the UI. It is super useful and saves a lot of time. You can immediately get it by pressing Command-Shift-P, heading over to Plugins, and then searching for Junie. So now that we've prepared our coding environment, we are ready to get started. I'll open up the integrated terminal. You can do that by pressing Control and then the key left to the 1 key on your keyboard. And within it, you can type the command of npm create vite add latest, and then add the /, which means that it'll create it within the current repository, and then press enter. It'll ask you whether you want to install create vite installer. You can say Y for yes. And then if it says your current directory is not empty, you can just say empty it, and let's continue. Now, it'll ask you a couple of questions on how we want to set up our Vite environment. We'll be using React to build this project, but you're more than welcome to follow along with any framework that you like. In this case, I'll go with React. And just for simplicity's sake, I'll use plain JavaScript, but once again, you're free to use TypeScript as well. Now, it asks us whether we want to use roll down Vite. I'll skip it for now because it's still experimental, but by the time you're watching this video, it could already be added by default. Finally, are we ready to install the packages and start? I'll say yes. It should take just a couple of seconds for everything to get installed, and we'll be running on localhost 5173. So you can open it up within your browser, and it should look something like this. Now, as you can see, I have no top bar or anything else cluttering the view, and that's because I'm using Arc. It's a nice browser designed as a Chrome replacement, and this is not sponsored, but I really like using it. So now you know. Now, instead of seeing this empty boilerplate, What do you say that we clean up our project a bit to prepare it for our application? I'll head back over to my IDE and we can explore the codebase together. Starting from top to bottom, we have the vite config, which is pretty much empty right now. Then there's the README explaining what our project is all about, a package.json which goes over all of our dependencies, index.html which acts as the starting point of our application. Later on right here, we'll replace this base favicon image as well as the title to make it personalized to your portfolio. Then there's the ESLint config, gitignore, and what we care most about are the public and the source folders. Within the public folder, you'll have all of the images and assets that we'll use across our entire application. For now, I'll go ahead and remove it, as later on we'll recreate it and add so many more assets. And then finally, there's the source folder, which also contains some assets, which we can remove from now. And we also have a couple of other files that we can go over together. The main file simply takes our entire application and adds it to this index.html file. Then we have the index.css, which we'll modify later on. There's the app.jsx, which acts as the starting point of our application. So I want to remove everything from here, as it currently has only this boilerplate, and instead I want to run RAFCE. This will spin up a simple React functional component that looks something like this. If this didn't work for you, you might need to head over to plugins and install modern React snippets. Then after you restart your IDE, it should work. Finally, there's the app.css, which we'll remove from now, as we'll do all of our styling within index, as well as within our files directly, as we'll be using Tailwind throughout this project. So if within your app.jsx, you render an h1 that says something like, "Welcome to my Macfolio," and save it, back in the browser, you should be able to see something that looks like this. It's not much, but we're getting there. And this is a great point to put my browser side by side with my editor so we can see what we're doing live. Now, as promised, we'll use Tailwind CSS. It's a utility-first CSS framework packed with classes like Flex, padding top for, text center, and so on, which makes it super easy to style your applications directly within your JSX with a simple syntax, still allowing for complete customizability. To install it, you can simply search for vite, and you can see how to get started using vite. First, we create a new project, which we've already done, and then the second step is to install Tailwind CSS and add Tailwind CSS vite. So I'll open up my terminal again. Actually, I will keep the first one running with my application, and I'll call it app, and then I'll rename the second one to terminal, within which we can run additional commands. And I'll install Tailwind and add Tailwind CSS /vite. Once that is done, the next step is to configure the vite plugin within our vite configuration. So if you head right here within the vite config, right here next to React, you can just add Tailwind CSS coming from add Tailwind CSS vite. Then the next step is to import Tailwind CSS within our index.css file. You can do that by heading over to index.css, removing everything we have over there, and just say add import Tailwind CSS. Finally, you can rerun your application and then start using Tailwind by adding classes like text-3xl, font bold, and underline, which I will add directly to my h1 within the app. So I'll say class, but it has to be class name because we're in React, text-3xl, font bold, and underline. And as you can see, we have a large heading that is bold and underlined, which means that we've successfully set up Tailwind. Now, alongside this build, I've also prepared a complete Figma design containing the full design of everything we'll build, showing you how different windows will look like, even giving you choice of different wallpapers that you can add as the background of our macOS portfolio. Now, obviously, this is a highly customized build, which will contain a lot of custom icons and fonts. So to save you some time from clicking around Figma and trying to download each one of these icons individually, I've took the time to collect them all for you in a single, easy-to-download zip. It is a part of the video kit that you can find in the description of this video. So once you head over there, you can click on it, and here you can click Assets. Just go ahead and download it. Once it's there, simply unzip it and then drag and drop it to the root of your application. It should look something like this. You can see that there's a folder to upload your resume. There's also all of the icons which we'll be using, the images, a MacBook for the favicon, and that's it. Immediately, this will allow you to head back over to index.html, replace this link from vt.svg to macbook.png. This will change this favicon right here on the left, and then you can also modify the title to be your name and then portfolio. That way, when you open up your sidebar, you'll see your portfolio. And alongside the assets, right below, you'll also be able to find a complete index.css. So you can copy it and paste it right here. It'll seem like a lot, but basically what we're doing here is importing a font we'll be using, importing Tailwind CSS as before, making some modifications to the HTML in the body, setting up the theme, and then creating all the different utility classes that we'll be using throughout this project. For example, styling how the main will look like, the navbar, and so on. So at any point in time, you'll be able to head back to this index.css to see exactly how we're styling things. So if you head back to your portfolio right now, you should already be able to see something that looks like this. Seems like we're already half done, but that is definitely not the case. The only thing you're seeing here is a wallpaper. Now is the time that we take that and turn it into something more like this, with a full navbar where you can open up and see info about your different projects, including your blog posts or maybe a terminal that shows the tech stack that you're good at, a contact me section, as well as the Finder where you can browse through all of your works. All of that is coming soon. You can follow along and learn how to build it with me in this course. Or if you want to skip ahead and make this project your own faster, I've made the complete source code available below. You'll still be able to follow along and build everything for free, but if you want to save time or dive deeper, that's an option. My team and I spent more than a month designing and developing this portfolio to make it super unique, so I wanted to give you an option to get it right away and make it your own. With that in mind, we can continue with the rest of the setup. And the one part of the setup is heading back to our Vite config and adding support for absolute imports. So you don't have to say // components / something. Rather, we can just do something like add components / component name. This is much better. And to make that happen within our code base, you have to import resolve from path as well as their name. And you also have to import file URL to path. And this is coming from URL. Then right below our plugins, you can say resolve. We'll be resolving aliases for different files and folders. And you can make it an object where we can define either an @ sign or a hash sign. And I'll first do it for the components, where I'll resolve it to their name, file URL to path, and then you need to import the URL, and then define a comma and the name. In this case, it's going to be the components folder. You can now duplicate this a few times. I'll do it 1, 2, 3, 4 more times. For the second one, we'll do it for constants. Make sure to change the name as well as the name right here. Then the third time, we'll do it for the store. This is going to be the global data store of our application. Then we'll have it HOC for higher order components. Yep, that's coming up soon as well. And finally, we'll do it for different windows that are going to appear within our macOS system. And then to make it work, you can also add a new file called jsconfig.json. Within here, you can define an object with compiler options, within which you're going to define a base URL of your application, which is going to be just the dot, meaning current repository. And we are in a JSON file, so you have to use double quoted strings. Then we'll define the paths and set them as hash anything, which will start from source anything, like this. The paths, of course, will be inside of an object, so we can put this part right here within it. Finally, we can go below compiler options and say include, and we want to include the source directory. This was that most tedious part that we had to go through, where now we have set up our file and folder structure, as well as our styling to be able to accommodate and make it easier for us to implement the rest of this amazing macOS portfolio. So in the next lesson, let's start from top to bottom and implement the Navbar. To get started developing our Navbar, let's create a new folder within the source folder and call it components. Within components, create a new file and call it navbar.jsx. And within it, run RAFCE. Once you have it there, you can then import it within the app.jsx. The only thing you have to do is wrap everything in a main tag, because this is the main part of our content. And then right here, you can render navbar. You can see that right now we get an error saying that the file doesn't seem to exist. So most likely it's an issue with our vite-config, where we're looking for it at components, but actually it's coming from source components. So at the start of all of these paths right here at the end, you also need to add source and then / a specific file. That'll look like this: components coming from source components, constants coming from source constants, and so on. And that way it'll able to auto import the navbar. And you can see that we can see it right there. And then you can just command click into the navbar and we can start developing it. First things first, I'll make it an HTML5 semantic nav tag, within which I'll have a div. Within that div, I will render an image with a source of /images /logo.svg. If you save that, you'll automatically see that we'll get this nice background and an Apple logo at the top left. Now, if you're wondering how these styles got applied, well, the answer lies in the index.css. If you head over here, you'll see that automatically to the nav element, we're applying a property of flex, justify between item center, as well as this BG white 50. If I remove that, you'll see that it is gone. I'm also applying a bit of a background blur, so we get this nice shadow at the bottom, as well as a padding of 2, padding horizontal of 5, and that's it. So at any point, if you're wondering which styles are applied, you can just head over to the index.css and find the corresponding element. Now an image also needs an alt tag, so I'll say logo, and right below it, I'll render a p tag that will have a class name of font-bold, and it'll say Adrian's portfolio. Or for you, it's not going to say Adrian's, it's going to say your name. Now below this p tag, I'll also render a UL, an unordered list, that'll need to render a collection of different links. That'll look something like this. It'll be an array where inside of it, we'll have one object for each link, and it'll contain an ID, something like 1, and then the name, maybe like portfolio. Then we'll have a second one and a third one, so it'll have IDs of 2 and 3, and names will be something like contact and projects. So now we have this array with these elements, and we can also map over them. So I'll say dot map, where we get each individual item, and then for each item, we want to automatically return an li. Now, when I say automatically return, what do I mean by that? Well, I mean that right here, we're not using a curly brace, but rather just a parenthesis. Because if you use the curly brace, that would mean that you're opening up a function block, and in that case, you would have to add an explicit return statement right here. But if you just make it a parenthesis, that means that it'll auto-return whatever is within it. Then to this li, we can give a key equal to ID, and then within the li, we'll render a p that'll simply render the name of the link. Of course, that name is coming from the item, so we can destructure both the ID and the name from the item by using this object destructuring syntax, putting it within the curly braces, allowing you to just extract the properties within it. And now you can see that we get this portfolio, contact, and projects right here at the top. But there's one improvement that we can make here. I never like to have data right here within our presentation. JSX and components like the navbar are for presenting something to the user. But this right here is just raw data. So what I typically like to do is extract it. I'll first extract this array by copying it, and then I'll define it right here at the top by saying const data is equal to, and then we can render it right here. So now the presentation part looks much better. You simply say data.map and render what needs to be rendered. But there's an even better way to do it. Instead of keeping this data here, I will copy it and create a new folder within a source folder called constants. Within constants, you can create a new file called index.js. I'm using index because that's the starting point of every folder. Within it, you can simply paste what you copied, this data, and I will rename it to nav links. And then you can simply say export const nav links, or you can declare it right here and then export it at the bottom, like this. That way, we now have a special file called constants within which we can declare all of our data pieces. The only thing you have to do now to use it is just import it. By saying nav links, you can see that WebStorm will automatically recognize that it's coming from constants. And take a look. That's it. We can still see them, but the presentation is much more beautiful. Now, talking about constants, they'll contain absolutely all the data that will be specific to you, as this is your portfolio. So within the video kit down below, I'll provide a complete constants index.js file, so you can copy it right now and paste it right here. It'll seem like there's so much stuff happening right here, but trust me, not really. If we collapse some of these large pieces of data, you'll see that this is the place where you'll actually define your projects, okay? So here is your work, and then within the work, you can define the name, the icon, the position, and most importantly, the additional description for each one of the projects that you develop. That means that this portfolio doesn't just work for me and my projects. You can just come in here and change the data very easily, just like changing a JSON object. If you scroll to the top, you'll see that the first thing that we have are the actual nav links. We also have the nav icons here, which are going to be useful for rendering those icons. So let's head back, and we're still importing the same thing from the same file. And whenever the file is index.js, specifically for that file name, you don't even have to define it. The first thing that our program will look into when looking at the constants folder is going to be the index.js. Now, below this div containing the left portion of our navbar, we'll create another div that'll be all about the right side. Within it, we'll also have a UL, and within that UL, we will map over nav icons this time, dot map, where we're going to get each individual icon, and we can automatically return an li for it. Each li will have a key equal to icon.id. But instead of saying icon every time, we can destructure the most important properties from the icon, such as the ID and the image, img. And now we can just say key is equal to ID. And within the li, I'll render an image tag with a source of img, a class name equal to icon-hover, and I'll also give it an alt tag equal to a template string of icon dash and then ID. That way, all alt tags are unique. And now you can see some icons appear at the top right. Now, we're not replicating a full macOS operating system, so these won't be functional. But if you want to get the final source code, in there, I also included a light and dark mode switch. So you can either get it from there, or maybe that's going to be a great challenge for the end of this course. Finally, I also want to display the current date and time, as every operating system has that. For that, we'll use a day.js library. So the only thing you have to do is head over to your terminal and run npm i day.js. Once you install it, you can simply import it at the top by saying import day.js coming from day.js. I always like to space out my external imports at the top and then have my internal imports be right below them. And then right here at the bottom, below this UL, still on the right side div, I'll render a time component. Yep, if you didn't know, there is an HTML5 component for time. And within it, we can simply render day.js, call it as a function, and then format the date in the DDD MMM D H MMA format. Sounds like a GTA cheat code, doesn't it? But here it is. You can see the full date and time. And believe it or not, that's it for a navbar. You can see how clean everything can be once you space out the additional data points in separate files. And that's it. We created it, and then within our app.jsx, we're using it. Great job with the navbar. In the next lesson, we'll focus on implementing this welcome part right here. It'll be a bit tricky, as you can see that it has some cool animations as you hover over the letters right here, but don't worry, because I'll show you exactly how we'll do that next. Implementing the welcome screen will be a bit of a bigger task than just developing a navbar. Here we have to install some new packages such as GSAP to provide all these animations, and we have to make it all work. For that reason, I want to teach you how to develop software properly. And that, of course, includes using source control. So I think this might be a good time to push the current code onto GitHub and start creating branches for the upcoming features that we implement. Head over to github.com/new and create a new repo with the name of macOS portfolio. And then just click Create Repository at the bottom. Once that's done, you'll need to copy the steps right here. So open up your terminal and run git init to initialize a new empty Git repository. Then git add dot to add all the current changes. Git commit -m first commit. Git branch -m main to change the base branch. Git remote add origin with your repo URL. And finally, git push u origin main, which will push all the current code over to GitHub. Now, as soon as you reload, you'll be able to see the code you've created so far, as well as the README. As part of the source code for the macOS portfolio, I'll also be including a modified README so that your portfolio doesn't just look good when someone goes to it, but when somebody checks your repo, it also looks and feels good. So now that we have the repo, we can create a new branch by running git checkout -b for creating a new branch, and you can call it feat, as in feature, /welcome, and press enter. This will now automatically switch you to a new branch, so if you run git status, you'll see that you're on feat welcome with nothing to commit, which means that we are ready to start implementing our welcome feature. To be honest, one of the primary reasons I decided to create a repo for this project, besides that, of course, it makes sense and it's a good practice to follow, is to be able to set up and test our code through CodeRabbit. CodeRabbit will provide us with an AI-powered code review that is actually good. Let's implement this feature, and I'll show you how it works. First things first, let's start by creating a new component inside of the components folder, and I'll call it welcome.jsx. Within it, I'll run rafce, and then we can simply import it within our app.jsx. Right here below the navbar, I'll just start typing welcome, and it'll auto-import it for me. Now notice how as we get more components, the list of imports will also grow, so that at the end, we'll have something that looks like this. So many imports. Instead of that, there's one trick that I want to show you. If you go to the components and create a new index.js file, within that index, you can import all the components you're creating, such as the navbar and the new welcome that we created. So we can import the welcome component, and then at the bottom, you can export all of them as we're exporting the constants. So I'll say export navbar as well as welcome. If you do that, and then head back over to your app, you can now remove these two imports and do it in a single line by saying import within curly braces, navbar, as well as welcome. And these will be coming from #components. That's it. So every new component you create, you can just render the component name right here, such as comp1, and you can add it to your code within a single line. No need to have multiple lines for each new import. Just make sure to export it from this index before. With that said, Let's now head into the welcome and start implementing it. This is the moment in time where we'll need some help. Implementing animation like this one is not easy, especially not on hover and making it interact with different letters. And that's exactly what GSAP is made for. See, GSAP allows you to animate anything. It's a JavaScript animation library built for professionals, allowing you to do basically whatever you want to. The possibilities are endless. I liked it so much that one of the courses on jsmastery.com is only about GSAP. It's not about building random animations, but rather the ones that actually get you paid. In the course, I teach something called emotional design, where I go beyond just code and teach you how animation can build trust, like Stripe. It can scare people into completing streaks like Duolingo, or make people want to buy your products like they want apples. And as part of the course, you'll rebuild GTA 6's landing page, that masterpiece of a website. And also, jsmastery.com is built in a way that allows you to see exactly which code applies what kind of an animation. But okay, that's enough about GSAP and the course. If you want to dive deeper, you can check it out. But in this course, I'll teach you how to implement this beautiful hero section. So first things first, we have to install GSAP by running npm install GSAP as well as @gsap/react. We'll also use some additional icons, so you can run npm add lucid-react. Now we can start. Right here within the welcome component, I'll create two React references, refs. One is going to be called a title ref, and we'll use the useRef hook and set it to null at the start. And the other one will be called subtitle ref, and I'll also make it null at the start. We'll use these to interact with the actual elements. Then I'll turn this div into a section and give it an ID equal to welcome. Make sure to have it exactly as I have it, because this will apply some additional styles. Then within it, I will render a p tag to which I'll attach this subtitle reference. And within it, we can render some kind of text, such as, hey, I'm Adrian. Or you'll put your name, of course, and then you'll say, welcome to my, and then in big letters right below, within an H1, we'll say portfolio. Of course, let's give this H1 a ref as well. This one will be a title ref, and we'll also give it a class name equal to margin top of 7 to divide it a bit from the subtitle. Oh, and what I want to do here is also add another div below H1, and this div will have a class name equal to small-screen. Within it, I'll render a p tag that'll say this portfolio is designed for desktop/tablet screens only. So if someone visits on a small mobile screen, they won't really be able to get all the benefits of these Finder windows, as this is made for desktop devices. So what'll happen is something like this. We'll hide the dock, show the title, and then at the top, we'll say the portfolio is designed for desktop and tablets only. When I'm done recording this course, at actually making this thing fully mobile responsive. If so, that'll be a part of the source code bundle, or a nice challenge for you to develop. But okay, let's get back to this nice animated text. This is definitely not it, right? We cannot just have an H2 and a P and call it a day. We have to figure out the logic of animating the characters. And we'll do that through a special helper function. I'll define it right here at the top, above the welcome component, and I'll call it render text. It'll be equal to an arrow function that accepts a couple of props. First, the text we are looking to render, the class names we want to apply to that text, as well as the base weight of the text, which by default I'll set to 400. Then within it, we want to return. First, we want to spread that text into its individual characters. So you can put in an array and say ... text. This is the same as doing text.split. Then you want to map over each individual character and get an index for that character. Then we can immediately return a span element for each of the characters. This span will have a key equal to index, or I, a class name, which we're passing through props, so that'll be equal to class name, and it'll also have an additional style. This style will be set to font variation settings, and I'll make that into a template string of a string WHGT as in weight, and I'll set it to base weight like this. We'll nicely space those out, and within each one of these spans, we want to render a character. So I'll say character, but if the character is just an empty space, then we want to render a Unicode character for no break space that is /_u00A0, or else we want to render the character itself. So now that we have this render text helper function, we can actually use it to render these pieces of text, but split them character by character. So I will simply wrap this piece of text within this p tag into the render text function. It'll be, hey, I'm Adrian, welcome to my. And then I'll also apply an additional class name of text-3xl and font-georama. And finally, I'll give it 100 milliseconds for the base weight. Make sure to properly close all the strings within it and the function call. Once you do that, it should look like this: render text, 3 different parameters. First is the text, second are the class names, and third is the base weight, exactly as we defined above. It looks better, but we're still not animating it. That's gonna come soon. And now we can do the same thing for the portfolio. I'll also wrap this portfolio in a render text. The portfolio will be the first parameter, and then we'll provide it a text-9xl class name, italic, and font-georama with a base weight of 400, which we don't even have to pass because it is set to 400 by default. Just make sure to properly close it. And there we have it. This is already looking so much better. Hey, I'm Adrian. Welcome to my portfolio. Now let's animate it. First things first, we want to create a new function outside of the component called setup text hover. So here we're going to deal with whatever happens once we hover over the text. It'll accept the container we're hovering over, as well as the type of text we're hovering over. Then we'll check if there is no container, we'll simply exit the function. But if there is something, we want to get access to the letters. And letters are stored within the container dot query selector all, and we'll target it by the span element because each span is actually a character. Then we want to figure out which styles or weights we want to apply to each character when hovered. So I'll define that at the top. I'll say font underscore weights. And typically when something is a constant, something that doesn't move, you can define it using capital letters with underscores in between. I'll define the subtitle. For subtitle, the min weight can be 100, max can be 400, and default can be 100. Whereas for the title, the min will be set to 400, the max will be 900, and default again can be 400. So now that we have these font weights, we can use them right here by destructuring them first. So const min, max, and the default, which I'll rename to base, and that'll be coming from font weights for each specific type. So if we're on the type of subtitle, then it's gonna get these ones right here. If it's title, it'll be a bit bolder. Once we have those, we can start animating things. So I'll say const animate letters is equal to letter, weight, and duration. These are the 3 important pieces of animating each letter. And it's animating each letter, not all of them together. So I'll call it animate letter, not letters. And I'll make the base duration of 0.25 seconds. Then we can open up a function block and immediately return a GSAP.to animation. Make sure to import GSAP from GSAP right here at the top. And we dive super deep into each one of the GSAP methods within the GSAP course. But just know that the GSAP2 function first accepts the target that we want to animate, and then what do we want to do to it? How do we want to animate it? So we're animating each letter individually, and then for each one, we want to change the duration, set to the base duration we have here. We also want to set the easing, how it's going to ease into that animation. We'll use the power2.out. And finally, you want to set the font variation settings, and here you want to set the weight to be equal to the weight, just like this. And now that we have this animated letter, it's great, but we have to call it somewhere. And we're going to call it as we're moving our mouse. So below, I'll declare a new function called handle mouse move. And that'll be equal to event of the mouse move. And we'll open up a function, and we need to get access to the mouse position. Specifically, I'll get access to the left portion of the container by saying container.get bounding client rect, like this. And then we can get the mouse position by saying mouse x is equal to event.clientx minus left from the container. Now that we know where our mouse is and where the letters are, we can just say letters dot for each letter. We want to open up a function block. For each letter, we want to get access to its position. So say left and rename it to L. And we also want to know its width, which I'll rename to W. And that's going to be coming from a letter dot get bounding client rect. Then we want to get the distance of our mouse movement, and that's going to be equal to math.abs, as in absolute, of the mouse x position minus L minus left plus W over 2. Bear with me, the last thing we need to get is the intensity of which we want to animate it. So I'll say const intensity is equal to math.exp, as in exponent, where we want to get the negative value of the distance on the exponent of 2 divided by 2000. How I got to these numbers? Don't ask. Some AI might have been used in the process. But I was playing a lot and tweaking it, and it ended up working great. I'll explain it a bit more as soon as we actually put it to action. So I'll say animate letter. Now we have all the info we need. Which letter we're animating, the weight, which is going to be equal to min plus, in parentheses, max minus min times the intensity, and you can save it. Now to actually turn it on, you can head within the welcome component and use the use GSAP hook, which is coming from GSAP React. Within it, you can create a callback function and have a dependency array, defining when this will happen. It'll only happen at the start. There, we want to call setup text hover and pass the title ref.current, and also setup text hover with a subtitle ref.current. And as the second parameter, you have to define what we're animating. So the first one will be the title, so I'll call it title, and the second one will be the subtitle. Now we're super close to actually animating the text. The only thing we have to do is actually call the handle mouse move function, which should be a part of the setup text hover, just below the animate letter. So if it's not there for you, but maybe outside of it, make sure to put it within the setup text hover below the animate text letter. Then you can head below the handle mouse move, and we can add it as the event listener on the container by saying container.add event listener mouse move handle mouse move. Now, if you hover over it, it should actually work, but it looks like the font weight is not getting applied. That might be because of how we're setting it. See, right here, I'm saying WHGT, but actually the acronym or the shortened version of weight is WGHT, weight. So we have to fix it here as well as here. And you have to close its string sign right here to encapsulate it inside of a string. And if you do that and reload and try hovering over it, you'll see that it's actually applying it. But you can take a look that where you exit with the mouse, that part will still have the bold font applied. So we also have to handle the mouse exit. We can do that easily. Right below the handle mouse move, we can also declare a new function, const handle mouse leave. And we'll say letters dot for each letter. We want to have an immediate return of animate letter, and we'll take the letter and simply set it to the base weight throughout a period of 0.3 seconds. So if you save that, we also need to add an event listener for mouse leave and handle mouse leave. Now, whenever you're adding event listeners, you also have to remove them. So right below, I will return a callback function within which I'll say container.remove event listener for mouse move as well as for mouse leave. And it's never a bad idea to do some cleanup of these event listeners and GSAP functions. So what you can do is you can declare the name for this setup text hover by saying const title cleanup. And we can do the same thing for the subtitle cleanup. And once you declare them, right below, you can do the same thing as we've done before. Kind of clean up the event listeners by returning a callback function that calls the subtitle cleanup as well as the title cleanup right here. So now if you reload, you'll see that you can enter and exit. And this is such a smooth animation. And you can see that it's even bolder on the bottom part of the portfolio. This is looking beautiful. Another thing you can play with is the intensity. So if I head over right here to the handle mouse move, where we have the intensity set to divided by 2000, you can try changing this number and see what happens. If you do number like 1, you can see that now it'll be very little. Like if you move it, it'll only appear on that specific letter. But if you increase it to something like 100,000, then it'll actually appear on the whole thing as soon as you hover over it. You want to find a middle ground. In this case, I found like 20,000 to work the best. This way, as soon as you start hovering, it hovers a better portion of the screen. And this felt the most smooth to me. And with that, you've successfully implemented the Welcome Hero section of your portfolio. But this was a lot of code. We installed additional dependencies, and we need to make sure that it all works and scales properly. For that reason, I'll now push it over to GitHub and open up a PR so we can get another set of eyes to check this code for us. Right within our terminal, run git add, git commit -m, implement welcome section, and then git push. Since we created a new branch, you'll need to set the upstream to combine the current local branch to the remote repository. And once you do that, if you check your macOS portfolio repo, you'll see that the feat welcome branch had a recent push 19 seconds ago. So we can compare the changes and open up a pull request. We want to merge feat welcome into the main branch, so let's create a pull request to move that code over there. Typically, in enterprise-level applications, none of the code goes directly to main. That's a sin. So someone has to review your code first. And if you don't have a senior developer standing by you, looking over your shoulder and telling you how you can improve, then we need to find another tool that'll help us write better and more quality code. That's CodeRabbit. I'll leave the link down in the description. You can click it and create a new account to get a free trial. Yep. Just 2 clicks away from shipping higher quality code. You can get started with GitHub, and once you're in, it'll ask you to add your repo. Once you click Add Repo, you'll have to authenticate with your GitHub account, and then give it access to either one or all the repos. I selected all, so it automatically tracks all my code. Once you do that, back within your PR, you should be able to see that now we have a new summary created for us by CodeRabbit. We've introduced some new features, such as the animated welcome section with interactive per-character hover effects that respond to mouse movements for enhanced visual engagement. And we also updated our project dependencies to support these new animation capabilities. CodeRabbit is now processing this PR, which may take a couple of minutes, and even though it has no memory of this place, it'll find the bugs anyway. So let's give it a minute, and I'll be right back. And here in the walkthrough, we can read a bit more about exactly what we've done. This is super useful because maybe you're working on a team and maybe you were not the one who implemented these features, but you needed to provide a review. Having this additional information is crucial. And it figured out exactly what we're doing. We're implementing a welcome component with per character animated font weight hover effect powered by GSAP. I like how it explained exactly what we did in as little words as possible. We also added 3 dependencies and modified the following files. What I love the most about it is this sequence diagram. It basically explains exactly how our application is working. User mounts the welcome component, then the use GSAP hook initializes, we call for the title and subtitle, we attach the mouse over and mouse leave listeners to the DOM, and then as the user moves the mouse over the text, the DOM triggers the mouse move event, we calculate the distance to each letter, compute the weight via the exponential intensity, animate font weight for each span, update the font variation, and finally, as the trigger mouse leaves, we reset all the weights to default. This is exactly what we've done, but being able to see it visually is super useful. This saved us about 20 minutes of time that it would typically take to review this code, and we even got a little poem. What I love about them is that they're not just generic. They're talking exactly about what we did. A rabbit hops through hover states where letters dance with GSAP's grace. Each letter glows, animated weight, as mice move swift through welcome space. A portfolio blooms, a warm embrace. I don't think I've given it justice, but I love it. You can see we pass some checks, and then after that, we get some nitpicky comments, as well as some additional potential issues. For example, we're not yet using Lucid React, so he's suggesting that we can remove it. Then we got another suggestion. This is actually a potential issue, and it has been ranked as critical. We have to fix this early return to prevent the runtime errors. Here we return undefined, but the cleanup code at lines 69 to 70 attempts to call the functions title and subtitle cleanup without checking if they're functions. This will cause a type error, cleanup is not a function, runtime error. So instead, we have to return at least a base function instead of undefined to be able to fix it. Now we immediately get a committable suggestion, which is great, or a prompt for an AI agent to implement it. But before I fix it, I actually want to learn a bit more about why this happened and why this fix is so critical. So I will copy this part from CodeRabbit. I'll actually copy the whole thing, including the prompt for AI agent, head back over to WebStorm, and then press Command-Shift-P and search for Junie. If you haven't yet installed it, you can do that. I'll put the link down in the description. I'll paste what I copied over from CodeRabbit. I'll say CodeRabbit suggested that there's a potential issue, critical. And then, right below at the end, I'll say, tell me more about this issue. Does it really pose a problem? And fix it for me. It should be able to do that because CodeRabbit provided this nice AI block. I'll leave it on auto, as it should be able to figure out where the issue is happening within our codebase. So I'm hoping that this prompt will not only fix the issue, but also tell us a bit more about why this issue happened in the first place. And there we go. As you can see, it says a patch was applied to update a function so that it returns a no-op cleanup function when the container is not available. And then if you expand this part, it actually gave us a bit more information on what was the issue. See, our setup text hover, which I'll now find within this welcome right here, returned undefined when the container ref was empty. Here it is. Before, we were returning like this. And if you don't provide anything after the return statement, it means that it is undefined. But now it fixed it so that we return an empty function so that callers can safely invoke it later on during cleanup. And it even gave us more information about why can container be null, how we fixed it, and even some info about the extra safety. This is exactly what I wanted to get. So now we know that we will never get an error right here. Finally, there's another potential minor issue, which is fixing a typo in user-facing text. It says this portfolio is designed for desktop and tablet screens, but we're supposed to say tablet. This one is easy to fix. Just search for tablet in your code, and you can fix it. Other than that, we had no other issues. So now that I've fixed these ones, I'll actually go ahead and do another quick commit by saying git add dot, git commit, implement CodeRabbit suggestions, and git push. It'll automatically recognize that we implemented the changes. It'll verify that they indeed got fixed, and then you can go ahead and merge the pull request. You can see that even on a singular feature such as a welcome section, there were still some things that I missed, even though I prepared the codebase to be flawless for this course. So CodeRabbit saved the day. Now back within our codebase, I will check out back to the main branch and run git pull to have all the latest changes. Now we are ready to move to the next feature, and that is the doc. The doc alongside the Navbar and the hero section will really help us sell that Mac operating system illusion right within our portfolio. Next up, the dock. Yep, this famous macOS dock that as you hover over the icons, they slowly pop up and invite you to click them. To get started working on the dock, I'll create a new branch by running git checkout -b, and I'll call it feat, as in feature, dock. Then we can get started working on it by creating a new component within the components folder, and I'll call it dock.jsx. Run rafce to quickly spin it up, and then let's also export it from our index.js so we can easily import it within the app. That is dock right here. And then if you head over to our app.jsx, we can now import it directly below the welcome, coming from components. Perfect. Now, as usual, I'll put my browser side by side with my editor so we can see the changes we're making live. And you can see the dock right now is just a piece of text that is attached to the top right. But now we have to actually develop it. Let's start by turning this div into a section that has an ID of dock. Then within it, we can render a div to which we'll need to attach a ref. Refs are important to be able to target these elements using GSAP so we can animate them. So in this case, I'll define a new ref by using a useRef hook, and we can do that easily by saying dock ref is equal to useRef at the start set to null. And then we can attach the dock ref to this div. Then I'll give it a class name, which we can set to dock-container. This will automatically put it right here at the bottom. That's happening because this dock ID provides an absolute positioning with a bottom of 5, making it come right here to the bottom middle. Within this div, we want to map over the dock icons. So I'll create a new dynamic block of code and say dock apps coming from constants. If you want to explore this first, you can see that the dock apps is nothing more than an array with a couple of different objects. Here we have our Finder, in this case that is the portfolio. Then we have the Safari, which we use for our blog articles. Then we have the photos for the photos, or the contact section, the terminal, and the trash. So we want to map over those icons and display them. So I'll say .map. We get each individual app from which we can destructure these properties: the ID, name, icon, and can open. So just use the object destructuring sign right here, which is basically a pair of curly braces, and then get all of these properties. And then we can immediately return a new div for each one of these. Let's make sure to close it properly. Give it a key because we're mapping over it. It'll either be an ID if we have it, or maybe a name if the ID is not there. Although I do believe that every single one has an ID, so that should be good. Then we can also give it a class name equal to relative, flex, and justify-center. Within it, we'll render a button for each one of these elements because that's what they are. They're little buttons situated within the dock that respond to movement. Each one of these buttons will have a type is equal to button. It'll also have a class name equal to dock-icon. It'll have an area label of name. And now you can already start seeing that we already have some space for the dock. If we really want to make this accessible for all the different screens, then we also want to give it a data tooltip ID equal to dock-tooltip. I'll also give it a data-tooltip-content, which we'll set to name. We're doing this so that once you hover over it, you can actually see what you're clicking on. I'll also set the data tooltip delay show to about 150 milliseconds, and I'll make it disabled if it's not can open. And finally, don't forget the on click. So once we click on each one of these buttons, we want to toggle the app, whichever one we clicked. We want to kind of turn it on. So for that, I'll create a new function right here called toggle app, where we pass the app we want to toggle. Now, for now, I'll keep this toggle app empty, and I'll just call it right here when we click on the button, and I'll pass over the app that we clicked on. That app will actually consist of an ID of the app and whether we can or cannot open it. And now, most importantly, within each one of these buttons, we need to render an image for its icon. This image will have a source of /images, and then the icon. Then I'll also give it an alt tag of name, a loading of lazy, as well as a class name of whether if it can open, I'll give it no class name, but if it can't, I'll reduce the opacity so it seems like it's not really clickable to something like 60. If you save this now, you'll see that all the icons besides the trash can have the full opacity and they will be clickable. Finally, we want to render the React tooltip package. I'll use this super well-known React-tooltip npm package, which has over 1.5 million weekly downloads. The only thing we have to do to get it is run npm install React tooltip within our terminal. And then to use it, the only thing we have to do is import the tooltip by copying this line right here, or you can follow along with me. That's going to be import tooltip in curly braces from React tooltip. And then you need to provide these properties that we already provided right here of what that tooltip will say. Finally, we have to include the tooltip element. That'll look like this. Right here at the top of the last closing div, I will render the tooltip, give it an ID of doc-tooltip, a place of top, and a class name equal to tooltip, and self-close it. If you do that and go back, you'll now see that as you hover over it, it says portfolio, articles, gallery, contact, skills, and archive. I decided to do it this way because the Finder icon in macOS means something different, or like Safari, but within your portfolio, the Finder is actually the portfolio. So we needed to say that so that people have a good user experience using your portfolio. And now that we're done with the JSX section, we are ready to actually animate it, which we'll do using GSAP. Right here below defining the doc ref, I'll use the use GSAP hook with a callback function. And then within it, I will define the doc by making it equal to docref.current. Then if there is no doc, we'll simply exit out of the function because there's nothing to animate. But when we know that there is a doc, we are ready to get access to all the icons that we want to animate by saying doc.querySelectorAll, and we want to get all classes of doc-icon. Once we get them, I want to create a function that animates them. So say const animate icons, and we'll do it based on the mouse X position, so the horizontal position of the mouse as it scrolls through the doc. Then within this function, similarly to how we animated the text right here in the portfolio, we want to get access to the left position of the doc, so we know when it starts. So const left is equal to doc.get bounding client rect. Once we have the left position, we can say icons.for each icon. We can open up a function block and get the start position of the icon. So I'll say left, which I'll rename to icon left, and the full width of the icon. And that's going to be coming from icon.getBoundingClientRect. So this is exactly the same as what we've done in the welcome. Right here, you can check how we have done it. We have first gotten the left position of the container of the entire portfolio, so the start right here, same as we're getting the start of the bottom doc. And then we're getting the left position and the width of a character. So left of a single character, and then its width. Left of a character, width. Same thing here. We're getting the left position of a character, or in this case, an icon, and then its width. So we know when we have to move that specific icon. Creating animations is all about thinking how to approach it. Once you have the idea, it's easy to implement it. Let me show you. We also want to get the center position of the icon in this case. And we can get the center pretty easily by saying icon left minus left of the container plus width divided by 2. Then we want to get the distance of the mouse from the center of the icon. So math that absolute mouse X minus the center. And as before, I'll grab that intensity that we had right here when we were animating the letters in the welcome section. So simply copy it and paste it right here. And finally, we can animate it by saying gsap.to. We're animating the icon. And we want to modify its scale, which is 1 by default, to which we want to add 0.25, and then multiply that by the intensity of the mouse movement. We'll also modify its Y position to -15 times the intensity. I'll also do it throughout the duration of 0.2 seconds, and we'll set the ease of power1.out. Now, the only thing remaining for us to do is to actually handle the mouse movements. I'll do that right below the animate icons function, so make sure to exit out of it properly, and then say const handle mouse move. We're accepting the mouse movement event right here. We're getting its left position by saying doc.getBoundingClientRect, and then we'll call the animate icons function and pass in the e.clientX, which is the current position of the mouse, minus the left position of the dock. As with the letters, we'll also need to reset the icons once we move out of their view. So right below the handle mouse move, I will also do const reset icons, which is going to be a callback function, where we can automatically say icons.for each icon. We want to automatically run GSAP.to. And for that icon, we want to change the scale back to 1. We want to modify their Y position back to 0 throughout a duration of 0.3 seconds and with an ease of power1.out. That'll look something like this. And now if we put it all together, right below the reset icons, we can say doc.addEventListener of mouse move. We'll call the handle mouse move function and make sure that we're in the same function still. We still have to be within the use GSAP hook. I think I went a bit too far, so I need to get back right here. And also doc.addEventListener mouse leave. We want to call the reset icons. Let's not forget to do the cleanup. So I'll say return a callback function where we say doc.remove event listener of mouse move, as well as remove the mouse leave. And we only want this to happen at the start, so we'll add an empty dependency array to this use GSAP hook. And now, just before we test it out, also make sure to import GSAP at the top by saying import GSAP from GSAP. And if you save that and reload, as you start hovering over them, you can see how they jump up and down. But it seems like the intensity is a bit too high because they all seem to be jumping together. Whereas in the final application, only one jumps and the other one kind of awaits to jump. To fix that, I think we can play with the intensity a bit. I'll try to set the distance to 2.5 because our icon's a bit further away than the letters right here in the portfolio. Reload your page, and if you test it out now, you can see that only one jumps out, exactly as we're hovering over it. This is perfect. It almost feels like the doc is done, and its visual representation actually is. But next, we'll have to focus on what happens once we actually click each one of the icons in the doc. And that is exactly what we have to do right here as part of the toggle app function. Here, we'll have to implement the open window logic. We'll do that in the next lesson, but for now, I'm happy with how this looks. So let's go ahead and commit it. I'll open up the terminal and run git add dot git commit -m implement doc presentation and run git push. Of course, we'll have to set the upstream, so you can just copy this command and paste it in. Then within your GitHub, you'll see that your feat doc PR had the recent pushes 3 seconds ago. So go ahead and compare it and make a pull request. Once you do that, we'll give CodeRabbit about a minute to process our PR. And as I was saying process our PR, it looks like the walkthrough was already generated almost instantly. Going over the CodeRabbit walkthrough, we have successfully added React tooltip, created a new doc component featuring GSAP-based hover animations that scale and translate icons based on cursor distance. Here's another one of those sequence diagrams that explains exactly how it's working. And in this case, it is pretty similar with what we have done with changing the weight of the letters on hover within the welcome section. So with that in mind, a dock has arrived with icons so fine with GSAP magic, they scale and align. This was a small PR and we've done an incredibly amazing job out of it. So no changes are requested, lucky us, but it's still super useful to get a nice PR summary. So I'll go ahead and merge it. Let's not forget to check out back to the main branch and do a git pull so that our dock appears right here. In the next lesson, we'll focus more on the Windows Store. This is going to be more about data and logic of opening different windows. A lot of exciting learning will be happening there, and it'll set the stage for how all the windows within our application are opened. Because if you think about it, we need to create one structure and then reuse that structure for all of the projects to actually make the code reusable. So let's dive into that next. Now, did you ask yourself of how we'll keep track of which apps are open, where they're being displayed, which windows shows up on top of another window, and so on? We'll do that using a state. You can think of state as a global data object that just knows what's happening around the app. While you could use React context, a lot of people nowadays tend to use Zustand as it's a small, fast, and scalable, bare bones state management solution. Don't disregard it because it's cute, as it has claws. They spent a lot of time fixing the issues, so we can very easily install it and use it. Go ahead and run npm install Zustand, and we can start creating our first store, or you can think of this as a global object that I was talking to you about. So we can copy the bare example, although we'll switch it up to work with our use case, and then we can create a new folder within the source folder, which I'll call store. Within store, create a new file and call it window.js. This store will be all about managing our windows. And instead of pasting this, we can write it together line by line. First, we have to import create from Zustand, and then we are ready to create a store by saying const use window store and make it equal to create like this. Now, what you can do is create a callback function that gets the set functionality right here and then returns objects. But if you do it like this, you have to be careful not to mutate any data that you pass. First, I tried it out and then I ended up having a lot of these spread operators because they don't mutate the data, they just spread it out. But that quickly got overwhelming. Then I did some more research and I found Immer. Immer is a middleware that lets you perform immutable updates. In order to be able to use it, you need to install the Immer library. So you can go ahead and run npm install Immer, and this will let you write mutating code in your setters, while actually it keeps state immutable under the hood. It just provides for so much more readable and cleaner less bug-prone code than manually using the spread operators and so on. So now that we've installed it, let me show you how we're going to create the store. To use Immer, instead of having this immediate set, directly within create, you have to call Immer from Zustand middleware Immer, and then only within it, you get this setter that looks something like this. Here we can define all of our store. Within the store, you can have some simple variables that just hold the data, such as windows, where you can define an array of all the different windows that you have. I already provided these to you under the window config constant. So if you just import it, you can see that this is an object containing all the different window names that we'll have within our application. And we're also setting their default z-index to 1000, so we can then increase it or decrease it depending on which windows we're clicking on. They all start as closed with null data. So this is just like setting up the initial window configuration. Then we have to figure out which is the next z-index, so we can make that window appear on top of the other one. For that, we can get the initial z-index from constants and then simply increase it by 1. In this case, I made a rookie mistake. You can see that it's complaining about this semicolon right here, and that's because I'm thinking that I'm in an object because I created it here, but actually this is a function block. So it's like I'm writing an object that isn't necessarily within an object, rather it's just within a function. So what we have to do instead, if you want to have this syntax, is you have to have automatic returns. So we have to wrap this curly brace in another pair of parentheses. only then will this be considered as an immediate return, like this. And now we can start creating additional functions that we'll use to manage our windows. The first one will be called Open Window. It'll accept the window key we're trying to open, as well as the data, which by default will be set to null. Then we can automatically open up the setter for it without a curly brace right here. And then we get access to the state, where we can open up a function block. I will actually duplicate this part right here, the open window, for two more functions that we'll use later on, 1 and 2. And I will rename them. First is open window. Then we have the close window, which just needs to know which window to close, but doesn't need any data. And finally, we need the focus window. If we want to bring a window that is already opened on top, this also doesn't require any data. So how do we actually implement this logic? Well, first of all, we have to get access to the window. And that's going to be when is equal to state dot windows, and then we get a window under the specific window key that we have clicked on. Then, since we're within the open window function, we'll set the when.isOpen to be true. We'll also modify the index by saying when.zIndex is equal to state.nextZIndex. And I'll modify the data, so when.data is equal to data, or if new data doesn't exist, we'll make it the same as the data that was already there. And finally, we want to increase the next Z index so that when somebody else opens a new window, it appears on top of the existing one. Now I will duplicate these 4 lines right here. Window is open, Z index, and data, and I will paste them to the close window as well. In this case, we're getting the window that we want to access. Then we're simply setting its isOpen property to false. Finally, we are resetting its Z index to initial Z index. And finally, we are setting the data back to null. Oh, but I just noticed something, and that is that here I said IDEX instead of index, so make sure to fix this typo right here. Perfect. And finally, we have to deal with the focus window. On the focus window, we want to, again, get access to the window itself, and then we're not going to deal with its opening or closing state. Rather, we want to update the Z index to make it state.nextZindex. And make sure to add the plus plus at the end of it so we actually increment it by 1, same as what we've done here. And there you have it. This is how we'll be managing opening and closing our windows within this application. And if you don't mind, I want to show you something. See, my team and I were developing this great application for more than a month. We really wanted to give it our best to make it as performant and as intuitive to use and as well animated as possible. So I want to give you a bit of a behind-the-scenes look of how the application store looked at the start of developing this application. So this is the same file doing more or less the same functionality. Check the difference. We are manually keeping track of all of the open states, the data, and different Z indices are set manually to 1000. Then, check this mess. We're not using the immer library, so we have to spread all the operators not to mutate the data, which is already a mess. We have to spread the current open state and then manually update it. And we're duplicating our code so much. Our code for opening and closing different things has not been made reusable. Rather, we have a special function for opening the Finder, then closing the Finder, opening the contact, closing the contact, opening resume, closing it, and then doing the same for every single app within our application. And even if you ignore all this duplication, you can still see how messy this part is. And you can see how descriptive and easy to understand the final code is. So I just wanted to let you know that this is all a process and that as you start to create your projects, the code might look messy, but with a lot of practice and effort, you can actually optimize it, shorten it, and make it so much easier to understand so that at the end of the day, you come up with a beautiful piece of state like this thing right here. But with that in mind, let's actually put this state to use. Don't forget to export the store by saying export default use Windows Store. And then we can head back over to our dock where we were supposed to use it, right here. So at the top of this component, you can use the state by saying const and then destructuring all the fields you want to get out of it, such as the open window, close window, and all the windows that there are, coming from use window store, which you have to import coming from store window.js. Then if you scroll down, where we have to implement the toggle app logic, you can now check if an app cannot be opened, so can't open app, then simply return. Else, we can get access to the current window that the user is trying to open by getting access to all the windows and then passing the specific app ID. And then if window is currently open, in that case, we want to close it. So I'll simply call the close window functionality and pass the app ID of the window I want to close. Else, we want to open it. So in that case, I'll call the open window and pass the app ID. Finally, we can console log all the windows that we have access to see this state in action. I'll now expand this portfolio and open up the console on the right. Now, if you toggle one of these apps, here you'll be able to see the full state. I just clicked on the Finder. So you can see that the isOpen state of the Finder is set to true. The Z index got increased to 1001, whereas all the other ones are still set to 1000. Then if I click it again, that will turn it off. So isOpen state is false, and it got returned back to the Z index of 1000. We can also open multiple apps at once. So I just click on all three, and you can see that now the isOpen state is true for the Safari as well as the photos. And we're playing with its Z index to make them appear on top of the other windows. I know it's a bit abstract to try to figure out how the logic works right now by just looking at the console log. So I'll remove it from now, and trust me, when you actually see those windows open up and close, when we implement that logic, it'll all start to click. Now, just before we commit this code, I want to show you another feature from CodeRabbit. Alongside PR reviews, they also recently came up with a CLI review. It's right here in the footer. The only thing you have to do to get it is copy this installation. It's supported on macOS, Linux, and Windows WSL, and paste it in your terminal. It'll automatically get CodeRabbit and tell you what you can do with it. You might need to restart your shell or run what it says right here, and then run CodeRabbit auth login to authenticate. Once you're in, you'll get a token, which you can paste, and you're in. The way it works is you first want to review your changes in CLI because it is much faster than getting them in the PRs. That way, the code that you actually commit to GitHub is already much cleaner. You get faster PRs, more caught bugs, and faster review times. To open it up, you can simply run CodeRabbit. It'll notice all of your modifications, and then you can press enter. And then it'll translate engineer steers into feedback. Or AI will pretend that it knows better than you. Or it'll critique you. I love this part as it's analyzing your code. So let's give it about a minute to calibrate its sarcasm levels, and I'll be right back. It's still reviewing the changes, but it already gave us a couple of suggestions. There is one potential issue in the doc saying that we need to add a defensive check for missing window. And then if you press enter on it, it says the code accesses Windows App ID without verifying the window exists in the store, which could cause a runtime error if there's a mismatch between doc apps and the window configuration. You can apply a simple diff check right here. If there's no window, then simply render the error. Even though for us this isn't crucial, because our windows are predefined and aren't going to change, if you or some other developers add some additional windows or modify the configuration, the error would indeed happen. So this is a nice suggestion. And CodeRabbit CLI provides you with a couple of ways to easily fix it. One is to just press the letter A, which will automatically apply the suggestion. So now if you head over to the doc and check out this part right here, it looks like it tried to add it, and it did actually add it, but it still left some things at the top and at the bottom right here, which are not needed because they're already included in this initial block of code. So there we go. Now we have this new check that we added. Then, if we head over to the store, there are three potential issues. Again, mostly validations and defensive checks. So it suggests right here to add a defensive check for the invalid window key. You can apply it like this, but let me show you another way of very easily fixing this issue. If you press the letter C, this will copy the prompt to fix this with AI. So I just press the letter C, I'll spin up Junie to help me, and then I'll paste this prompt. If you press enter, there's nothing more that you have to do. It'll take a couple of seconds and the patch will be applied. So if you check it right here, it says defensive. If the window key is invalid, do nothing. So if you head over to the store, you can now see the change added right here. If you know what it's doing, you can even remove the comment. And this would be useful for the open window, as well as some validation for the focus window as well. For now, I'll just add this check right here at the top. If there is no window, simply exit out of the function. Great. CodeRabbit again helped us make our code that much more production ready. And not only that, I actually love using it as an educational tool because it teaches us best practices that we would have otherwise missed. So now that the doc is done, in the next lesson, let me show you how to implement a higher order component, an HOC. Yep, we'll be learning about that in this course as well, even though you might have not expected it. We'll implement a higher order component that can be easily reused for all of these different windows, because at the end of the day, they all more or less look pretty similar. So let's do that next. In this lesson, we'll implement a higher order component that'll act as a wrapper for all of our windows. So back within the code, let's create a new branch by running git checkout -b feat window -wrapper. And let me show you how we can make it happen. See, instead of manually adding this window logic to every component, such as making it draggable, adding some animations, figuring out the focusing of the window logic, visibility control for each window, closing it, and so on, there's so much different pieces of logic that we have to implement for every one of these apps. So rather than duplicating the boilerplate code across multiple components, we'll create a wrapper kind of reusable component that acts as the initial skeleton handling all of these repetitive tasks. And we'll do that using something known as a higher order component, or an HOC for short. So within the source folder, I'll create a new folder called HOC, and within HOC, I'll create a new file called window wrapper.jsx, where you can run RAFCE to quickly spin it up. This higher order component is a function that'll take a component as input, and then it'll return an enhanced version of that component. But before returning it, it'll wrap that component with additional logic, props, and behaviors without modifying the original component. Now, for our windows to be draggable, we have to use a GSAP draggable plugin, which we need to add over to our app to make all of our windows draggable. So I will simply import draggable coming from GSAP draggable, and then I'll simply run gsap.register plugin draggable. And now we can get started with creating this higher order component that'll wrap all of our windows. Every higher order component needs to accept a new component as an input. And then I'll also pass an additional prop of window key. Then within it, we'll define how this new wrapped component will look like by saying const wrapped is equal to, we will accept some props and then define a new component. Within it, we want to get access to the variables and functions from the Windows store. So we can say const destructure the focus window as well as the windows, and we can get these by calling use Windows store coming from store window.js. Then we want to get the window that we're currently opening. So I'll destructure something out of Windows, and then we'll get into that specific window by passing the window key. So for example, if it is Windows and then maybe Finder, we will only return the data for that specific window. From it, the data that I'm referring to is the isOpenState and the Z index of that window. Then we can also create a new ref that we'll use to manage the animations. That'll be equal to use ref coming from React at the start set to null. And finally, from this wrapped component, we will return a new section. That section will have an ID equal to window key. It'll have a ref equal to ref, as well as a style equal to z index. So this will be the reason of why windows are appearing over one another when you click or drag them. By implementing these actions, we'll call focus window, which will take the latest z index and apply to the latest window. Of course, that's not working with the current state of our application, and that's because back in the app, we forgot to import GSAP right here. So I'll say import GSAP from GSAP. Now we're back to working state, but we can't yet open up the windows. So let's continue creating this window wrapper. I'll also give each window a class name equal to absolute. And within it, we want to render the component. Now, this is the component that we're passing as a prop to the window wrapper. So this can be the Finder component, the photos, the contact, terminal, it can be anything. But we're wrapping it with this additional window store logic. I will automatically close it and spread all the props that we later on decide to pass into this component. Now, just before we return it from this window wrapper, I'll say wrapped dot display name is equal to window wrapper, but I'll make it a template string, so window wrapper. And then we want to define the display name of that component. So it'll be dynamic component dot display name or component dot name, or if that doesn't exist, just component. So that way we're defining which component is this window actually wrapping. Finally, we can just say return the wrapped component. Now, we'll only be able to figure out how this wrapper actually works once we put it to use with one of these apps. So what do you say that we start working on the terminal first? It is this skills section right here. The terminal component will look something like this. It looks and feels just like terminal, where we're running the show tech stack command, and then we show different web or mobile categories, and then the technologies you're proficient with within those categories. So let me show you how we can create this component and wrap it with the window wrapper. This will be our first window. So let's create a new folder within the source folder, and let's call it Windows. Our first window will be the terminal, so I'll create a new file called terminal.jsx, and we'll use RAFCE. Now let's also use the same functionality for exporting the components from the components folder. We'll do the same thing for Windows by creating a new index.js file, importing the terminal component coming from terminal, and then we'll simply export it below so we can more easily import it later on. To put it to use, we can head over within our app folder, and right below, we'll render this terminal window coming from Windows. Again, no need to mention the index.js, and I'll put that right here next to the components. These are local imports, and these right here are coming from outside, and we're registering the plugin right below. So now there should be some kind of a text that says terminal right here. So let's dive into it and start implementing it. This terminal will be just an empty React fragment within which we'll have a div. That div will have an ID equal to window header, and within it, I'll render a p tag that says window controls, and I'll render an h2 tag that renders our tech stack. And now we can see window controls and the tech stack. Right below this div, I'll create another div that'll have a class name equal to tech stack, all lowercase. Within it, a p tag, and within it, a span that'll have a class name equal to font-bold. There we can say @Adrian or @your name, and then a percentage sign. And then outside of the span, you can say show tech stack. That'll look something like this. You can see it right here, but it doesn't appear like it's within a window. So how do we actually make it seem like it's within a window? Well, let me show you. Instead of just exporting the terminal, which is just like a small app within a generic window, we can first wrap it with our higher order component. So what a higher order component is, again, just a component that takes another component as an input and then returns a modified version of that component. So you can say const terminal window. So we're taking this terminal and turning it into a window. And we're doing that by calling our window wrapper component, the one we created not that long ago. And we're passing to it the terminal component. How do I know to do that? Because that's the first prop it accepts. And then we also need to pass the terminal key. In this case, that is just the word terminal. And then instead of exporting the terminal, we're exporting the terminal window from this component. If you do that and reload, you'll automatically be able to see that now it actually feels like a window, because this window wrapper section is applying some additional styles that, first of all, position it absolutely and make it look better, but they're also enabling us to have this focus window, is open, z-index, and all of the other functionalities that we created within the Windows Store without having to duplicate any of this logic within the terminal component itself or within all the other components to come. We simply have to wrap it and we power that component up with all the benefits of the state management and everything else. Hopefully this makes sense. If it doesn't, don't worry, because it'll start making much more sense as we repeat this process for every single component. So now let's continue developing it. I want to create a bit of a space right here before the show text stack. And then below this p tag, we'll render a div that'll have a class name of label, and within it a p tag that'll have a class name of w of 32 for width, that'll render the text of category, and below it another p tag that'll render the text of technologies. Finally, below this div, we'll render another UL, and this UL will have a class name of content, and there we can map over the text stack. This text stack is coming from our constants, and you can see that I put some technologies and categories that I'm proficient in, such as for frontend, I'm good at React, Next.js, and TypeScript, for mobile, React Native and Expo, styling, Tailwind CSS, backend, databases, and so on. But I invite you to modify both the categories and the items within the categories to match what you're actually good at. This is your portfolio after all. Then we can map over them. We're going to destructure the category and the items from the category and automatically return a list item for each one of the categories. That'll look something like this. Let's make sure to close it properly. And it looks like I missed one closing parenthesis here. Then within it, I will render a check icon coming from Lucid React, giving it a class name of check, as well as a size of 20. Then below it, I'll render the name of the category. So that's going to be just category. And finally, I'll render a UL within this LI, which is fully legal, that allow me to render the additional items within each category. So items.map, we get each individual item and its index, and we want to automatically return another list item that'll have a key equal to I. It'll render the item itself, and then let's make it actually look good by giving this initial li a class name equal to flex. So now they'll appear one after another, as well as items-center. We also need to give it a key equal to category to make it unique. If you want to, you can also add commas after each one of these technologies. That's going to be right here next to the item. But if you just provide it right here, you'll see that it'll also get added at the end of each line. So instead, we have to see if I is lower than items.length -1. Then we provide a comma, else we provide nothing. That way, it doesn't add it for the last one. And remove the space, so it looks better. Finally, below this second UL, this one here, we can render a div that'll have a class name equal to footnote, so something at the bottom, with a p tag where we render the check icon with a size of 20, and we can say 5 of 5 stacks loaded successfully, 100%. So we're kind of simulating how a real terminal would look like. And below this p tag, we'll render another p tag that'll have a class name of text black, And it'll also have a flag icon from Lucid React with a size of 15 and a fill of black. We're going to use that for the render time. So I'll say render time of 6 milliseconds. Cool. So this is our terminal, but we can't yet drag and drop it or close it or even open it for that matter. It is there because we just rendered it within the app main, right? It's there. But now we want to head back over to the window wrapper to implement the functionality that actually allow us to open, close, focus, or drag and drop this window around. To do that, right below this ref, I will use the use GSAP hook as before, create a callback function, and this time I will add one dependency array of isOpen. That way, whenever the isOpen changes, this code will be rerun. We want to get access to the current element, which is equal to ref.current. And then if an element doesn't exist, or if it's not open, we simply want to exit out of this function. We don't care about it. Else, if the element is there, we want to change its style display to be set to block. That's because by default, all the windows will be turned off. Oh, but how would we actually make that happen? How can we make the windows turned off at the start? Well, there is something known as use layout effect, which is very similar to use effect coming from React, but this one fires synchronously after all the DOM mutations. It's typically used to read layout from the DOM and synchronously re-rendered. You could as well use the regular use effect, but this one is just a bit more fitting for what we're trying to do. Here, we can also get access to the current element. If the element doesn't exist, so if no L, we'll simply return. But if it does, we'll simply change its style display property depending on the isOpen state. So if isOpen, we'll set it to block, else we'll set it to none. And we'll rerun this whenever the isOpen state changes. Now keep in mind that all of our apps, when we initially set them from the window config, have the isOpen property set to false. So that means that at the start, they should all be hidden. And if you reload the app, you'll see that now our terminal window will be hidden. But if you click on it and open it, you'll be able to open and close it at will. Beautiful. Now, I just want to be able to add a quick opening animation so it actually seems like we're opening a window. We can do that right here below this L style display. I'll say gsap.from2, we're animating the element, and we're going from a scale of 0.8, the opacity of 0, and Y position of 40. We're going over to a scale of 1, so we're increasing the size of the window, the opacity to 1 so we can fully see it, the Y position of 0, as well as a duration of 0.4 seconds with an ease of power3.out. I found this one to work the best. Now, since we're using GSAP, don't forget to import GSAP at the top by saying import GSAP from GSAP. And if you reload and click on the terminal, you'll see that it'll slowly enlarge, go from the opacity of 0 to 1, and it'll also go down a bit by changing the Y position. So if you click on it, notice how quick that is, but we can do it throughout the duration of maybe like 5 seconds, so you better see this animation in action. Reload your screen and click on the terminal, and check this out. So it's changing from opacity, lower scale, and a bit of a changed Y position to scale 1 and opacity of 1. Of course, we want to make it snappy, so something like 0.4 is more than enough. You can even make it snappier by making it like 0.2, and that way it's barely noticeable, but it is there. Now, maybe the most important part about these windows is actually making them draggable. To do that, we'll also use GSAP. So I'll open up another use GSAP hook with a callback function, and this time an empty dependency array because they always need to be draggable. I'll get access to the current element, and if there is no element, we can simply return. Then I want to call draggable.create. So we're creating a draggable effect on this specific element, and also on press. So once we click it, I want to call a callback function that will focus that window. So focus window with the following window key, like this. So now make sure to import draggable, and this one will be coming from GSAP draggable. And then as you open up the window, you can now actually drag and drop it on the screen. Pretty cool, right? It can also go outside of the screen. So at this point, we didn't really need this on press. We could have just made the element draggable and it would have worked. But we're adding this for later on once we have multiple windows opened. As soon as you start dragging one, the focus window will actually make it jump to the top by increasing its Z index. Pretty simple, yet pretty smart, right? And then in order to make our app efficient, we have to kill the instance of this draggable functionality. So say const destructure the instance, and then here you can say return a callback function that says instance.kill. That way we're not keeping track of all of these different draggable windows, rather we're just keeping track of the one that we clicked on. Pretty cool, right? So with this in mind, we not only implemented the window wrapper and the corresponding animations, such as the animation to open it up, we also implemented the dragging functionality using GSAP. We've also hidden all the windows at the start so that you have to click on them to open them. And we're doing all of that only once in our entire codebase because we're wrapping all the elements that are using that functionalities within a higher order component. Take a look at this terminal. It has no idea what's happening. It simply renders the code. The rest is happening right here where we're wrapping it, giving it all that additional context so it knows how it needs to behave. Oh, and just to finish it off, notice how we have these Windows control right here. Those should be those three dots that are common to every window. Since it's the same reusable UI, we'll create a new component for this. So head over to the components folder and create a new component called window controls.jsx. Use RAFCE to quickly spin it up, and then we can import it within our, I think we're using it in the terminal. Yep, right here, window controls. So instead of this, we can simply call the window control component. Oh, but let's make sure to export it first and actually call it properly. I have a double L right here, so window controls. And I will export it properly from the components folder, window controls, and we can export it. Then we are importing it here. I want to close it properly and give it a target set to terminal. So specifically, this instance of the window controls component takes in a prop that will know that it belongs on the terminal component. But for example, this one will be portfolio, gallery, and so on. So let's get into it and start developing it. It'll be pretty simple. As you know, it accepts a prop of target, telling it which windows should it be interacting with. Within it, we can automatically, very easily, get access to the close window functionality, which is coming from the use windows store. So once again, the logic of messing with those windows is completely separated from the rest of the components. Components don't need to care about that. They're simply calling these different hooks and getting the data out of them. And then the only thing it has to do is actually render a window, a div, that has an ID set to window controls. Make sure to put a dash in between. We'll render a first div. It'll be a self-closing div with a class name of close. And on click, it'll simply call the close window functionality. And we also have two more windows. One will be for minimizing it. So I'll give it a class name of minimize. And the other one will be for maximizing the windows. I didn't go ahead and implement these functionalities, but you can definitely do that as an additional exercise. There we go. So now at the top, you can see these three dots, and only the first one is clickable, and it should close the window. It'll only do that if you properly call it here. See, on this onClick, how we're calling it right now, we're not calling the function. We're actually passing the full function declaration into it. Instead, you want to make a callback function and then call it like this, and you need to pass in the target. And to make it reusable, the target is coming right through the props. So now if I reload and try to close it, you can see that it works. This component has no idea what's happening. The terminal component has no idea what's happening, but yet it all works together thanks to our higher order component called Windows Control, and thanks to our store, which manages all the logic. Trust me, getting to this point wasn't easy. It took a lot of refactoring and additional planning to make it this pretty and to make it this functional, so that at the end of the day, I can give you the best code possible. If you like these lessons that we just went through, such as the Windows Store or higher order components and all the little tips I covered along the way, you'll love what we do on jsmastery.com. I recently dropped the complete testing course if you want to learn how to test the real apps. Of course, there's always our flagship Ultimate Next.js course, which we're keeping up to date with every single new version. And there's this GSAP course that I was telling you about that'll teach you how to approach animations completely differently. You can get all of these as individual courses, or scroll down and join as a JS Mastery Pro member, where you'll get all those courses and so much more. And I'm looking forward to seeing you within the dashboard, where you can track your progress and maybe even beat me and others on lesson progression, where we recently added this nice gamification feature so you can level up and learn at the same time. I'll leave the link down in the description. Go ahead and check it out. But with that in mind, let's go ahead and push our latest code because we've done such a great work in this last lesson. So I'll run git add dot, git commit -m, and say implement a higher order component for managing window states and add the first window, terminal. And git push, we'll have to set the upstream, and in about a second, our code should be right here on GitHub, where we'll be able to open up its pull request. So let's do that next, as soon as CodeRabbit provides us with a review. In this PR, we've introduced a window management system using GSAP for drag interactions, a new window wrapper higher order component that manages window state, animations, and draggable behavior. The window control component provides control buttons, and a terminal component displays the tech stack information within the window framework. So overall, we got this new window management hawk that wraps components and makes them draggable, animated, and handles all the state for them. And then we implemented our first window of the day, the terminal, for displaying our tech stack. This is pretty cool. Within our app, we render the terminal. Then we wrap the terminal with the window wrapper, which then gets the window state, such as the is, open, and z indices, and then we can interact with it. And with that in mind, windows are dragging around the screen with GSAP magic, smooth and keen. Okay, I'll promise I'll stop from here on. Let's go ahead and merge this PR and check out back to the main branch and run git pull to pull all the latest changes. Next, we'll focus on the Safari component, the browser part of our application, which we'll use to open up your blog posts if you've written any. If not, that might be a strong nudge to write some technical education. But if you don't really feel like doing that, don't worry, because we'll find some other use case for it. Let's do that next. Let's dive right into our next feature, and that is our Safari browser, which in this case is acting as your developer blog, where you can list your blog posts and then open them up within a new tab directly where you're posting your blogs. So let's do this next. Back within your code, you can head over to Source, Windows, and create a second window. This time, it'll be a Safari browser.js. So just Safari JSX is fine. You can run RAFCE to quickly spin it up, and then you can export it out of your index.js. That's going to be Safari. And don't forget to export it here, which will allow you to very easily import it within your app.jsx right below the terminal. So I will render Safari, import from Windows, and render it right here. So head over into it, and we can start implementing it. I'll start by wrapping everything into an empty React fragment, and then within it, we'll have a div. This div will have an ID equal to window-header. And then here, we can render our window controls that we coded out in the last lesson. coming from components. That'll look something like this. Now keep in mind, if you don't wrap it within our window wrapper, then it'll take the full width of the container, our entire macOS system. But instead of that, we actually want to wrap it within our window wrapper. And we can do that in the same way we've done it last time. Const Safari window is equal to window wrapper, and then you pass in the actual Safari component and then give it a name, or the window key in this case, which is just Safari. And then instead of exporting Safari, we'll be exporting the Safari window. If you do it like that and reload, now if you click on it, you can see that you can actually open it and you can start drag and dropping it. It doesn't yet look good, but it will soon. Hopefully, as we continue developing each one of these new windows, you'll get a better understanding of this window wrapper component and just how important it is for everything to work seamlessly without us having to duplicate the code. In this case, we'll pass it a prop of target set to Safari, so it knows that once we click close, it closes the Safari window and not, for example, the skills window. Right below the window controls, we can render an icon called panel left, and this is coming from Lucid React. You can give it a class name of margin left of 10 and then icon. This will simply render this panel icon right here, which won't be functional, but we can definitely add some functionalities if you want to later on. Then I'll create another div that'll have a class name of flex, items-center, gap of 1 in between the items, and a margin left of 5. And here I'll render the chevron left coming from Lucid React. It'll have a class name of icon. And then right below it, we also want to render the chevron right icon, also coming from Lucid React. This will give us back and forward icons. We can also continue creating this header below this div by creating another div that'll have a class name set to flex-1, flex-center, and a gap of 3. Within it, we can render the icon called shield half. This is to let us know that Safari is protecting our browsing, and it'll also have a class name of icon. Here you have it. We can then create another div below the shield directly. This one will have a class name set to search, and within it, we can render the search icon coming from Lucid React with a class name set to icon. And below it, I'll render an input, which we can use as an actual search that has a type set to text. It has a placeholder set to search or enter website name, and I'll give it a class name of flex-1 so it expands as far and wide as it needs to. Then to finish it off, we can head 2 divs down and we can create another div with a class name set to flex, items-center, and a gap of 5. And here we can render 3 more icons. The share icon, in case we want to share this current website, with a class name of icon. And we can duplicate it 2 more times. For the second one, we're going to render the plus icon. And the third one will be a copy icon, all coming from Lucid React. All this together will give us this nice browser Safari-like view where you have the URL bar in the middle and you have some additional icons on left and right. Of course, if you want to add additional functionalities, you can totally do that. Now we're going to head 2 divs down and I'll create another div with a class name set to blog. Within it, I'll render an h2 that'll say my developer blog, or you can say something like my thoughts or whatever you want to say here. And then we'll create another div with a class name of space-y-8, within which we can map over our blog posts. Now, right now, blog posts are coming from constants, and you can see here that I have 3. Each one of the blog posts has its ID, a date when you wrote it, a title, an image, and a link pointing to a real website. This can be a platform for posting blogs such as Medium or Dev.to. If you haven't written any blogs yet, I would highly advise you to write them. you don't have to be an expert in the field to be able to write something. Just share your learnings or findings, or share how you built this portfolio, how you modified it, how you added additional features. Whatever it is, document it, write a bit about it in a technical way, and share it somewhere. It'll help position you as an expert. If you don't have blogs, these could be any kind of cards that have a date, title, image, and a link. So you can use this for showcasing other things as well. Once you have them, feel free to say .map, and then we can extract all the details from that post, such as ID, image, title, date, and the link, and we can automatically return a div for each one of these blocks. Each div will have a key set to ID and a class name set to blog post. Within it, we can render another div that'll have a class name set to call-span-2, so it spans over 2 columns. And within it, we'll render an image that has a source of image and an alt tag of title. If you save that, you should be able to see 3 icons. These are icons coming from my blog posts, but you can change them to match yours. Directly within blog posts, these can be actual images, which you can upload to the images folder and then simply refer to them here. Now, alongside the image, below this div, we also want to render another div for the content. So give it a class name of content, and then within it, render a p tag, rendering the date, also render an h3 for the title. And finally, we can also render an anchor tag, which is going to be the actual link. So I'll give it an href pointing to the link that we defined in our constants. I'll give it a target of _blank so it opens up in a new screen. And when you use _blank, you'll also need to add rel, no opener, and no refer. And within it, you can say something along the lines of check out the full post, and you can add an icon move right coming from Lucid React with a class name set to icon-hover. So if you save it, it'll look something like this. You now have this icon, and you can click on it to open up your blog post wherever you're writing it. If you don't know, I've started writing a lot of different blog posts directly within jsmastery.com. So head over there, create an account, and you'll be able to see them somewhere within your dashboard. But with that in mind, believe it or not, we are done with the Safari component. It was so much easier to make it now that it's simply reusing the functionality from our window wrapper. It's actually draggable, you can close it, and you can open it by clicking the articles icon. Amazing. And of course, the more blog posts you have, the longer the window will be, so feel free to add your best ones right here. This has been a short and sweet section, yet super useful if you want to showcase your expertise through technical writing. Oh, and a huge part right here is that now you can open 2 windows at the same time to show you how they stack. Take a look at how to the sides right here, this window has a bit of a shadow. So as you drag it on top of another window, it really seems like it's floating on top of it. It's like a 3D effect, right? You can move one around, you can move the second around, you can open them or close them, and best of all is, you can also focus them. See, if I place one on top of another and then click on it, it's gonna show on top. We're doing this with the window wrapper that's using the window store that calls that focus window function to increase its z-index by 1 and to make it appear on top. Pretty ingenious, right? So with that finished, we're ready to move over to our next window. In this lesson, we'll focus on a very important portfolio functionality, and that is the ability to view and download your resume. So head over to your portfolio. Later on, we'll focus on the work section, but for now, we can deal with this resume section right here, where you can upload your resume, and once they click it, they'll be able to see all of the details about you, and they'll also be able to download that resume directly to their device. So to get started with implementing it, you can create a new window within the Windows folder, and I'll call it resume.jsx, and you can run RAFCE. Once it's there, as usual, you can export it from the Windows right here. So that's going to be resume, and then add it to the export as well. Doesn't take that much time once you get used to it. Later on, as you saw, we'll be opening it from our Finder, from the portfolio. But for now, to be able to test it out, let's just quickly add it to the navigation bar. I'll head over to the Navbar, and right here at the top, we want to get the open window functionality. So const open window, and it's coming from use window store. Then right here within our nav links, which are now not doing anything, and you can see they're also hyperlinked to different sections, such as the contact, the portfolio, and one of them is also a quick link to the resume. So we want to be able to open it up. To do that, the only thing you have to do is add an on-click property to this li, where we're going to call the open window and pass the specific type of the window that we want to open. This type is coming right here, destructured from the nav links. And of course, that's going to say resume. So as you click on it, we are hoping for the resume window to open up. So let's focus on developing it so we can actually see something on the screen. First things first, this is also a window. So I'll say const resume window is equal to window wrapper. And we'll pass in the resume component as well as the window key of resume. And then we can simply export the resume window. This will now allow it to view it in a window format. Then, as usual, I'll wrap this into an empty React fragment. And within it, I'll create a new div that'll have an ID set to window header. Right within the window header, we will render the window controls. And this time, the target will be set to resume, so we can properly close that window. Of course, for the window to actually be able to appear on the homepage, we also have to render it directly within our app. So right below the Safari, you can render the resume window, or in this case, just the resume coming from Windows. And if you head back, you'll be able to see a little window right now, which you can close or open by clicking on this resume hyperlink at the top. Let's add some more stuff within it. Right below Windows Control, we can add an H2 that'll say something like resume.pdf. We can also render an anchor tag that'll have an href pointing to the link to your resume. So it's going to be files resume.pdf for me. So if you head over to your public files, you'll have to upload your resume right here and name it properly for you to be able to click it right here and download it. Alongside the href, we can also make this a downloadable href, give it a class name of cursor-pointer so people know they can download it, and a title of download resume. And then within it, I'll render the download icon coming from Lucid React with a class name set to icon. So now it looks something like this. And then right below it, we want to render the actual document. And for that, we'll use a library called React PDF. React PDF is super famous NPM library that has almost 2 million weekly downloads. I mean, just imagine creating a library that 2 million people use on a weekly basis. And the only thing you have to do to set it up is run npm i react-pdf. Then if you head over to its npm page and scroll down, you'll be able to see that we also have to import a worker. This will allow us to render that PDF. So let's copy this part and place it on the top of our resume component, like this. Alongside that, we'll also have to import a couple of CSS files. If you search for .css on the page, you'll be able to see the import for annotations or links in PDFs. This is annotation layer. So right on top of the worker, you can add an import for the annotation layer, as well as for the text layer. This is needed for this library to work well. And then let's see how we can use it. You have to wrap everything in a document, and then you have a page within it. So we'll simply copy this part right here and paste it below our current div. We have a document. The file we'll download is actually stored under files, resume.pdf. In this case, we don't need this on load success. For the page, we'll render the page number 1. We'll make it say render the text layer and render the annotation layer. This is needed for it to look as good as possible and to be able to render all the links and different texts. If you haven't already, make sure to actually import the document and the page, as well as the PDF.js from React PDF. Once you do that and click Resume, you'll see that it'll actually open it up. You can close it, you can open it, and it is there. Hopefully you have uploaded your resume to your codebase, and you can see it right here within your Mac operating system portfolio. And if we go full screen, it looks even better because now you have your portfolio right here. Recruiters will soon be able to pull up all of your contact information, maybe the skills and the blog posts on the side while playing with these letters. And the best part is that they can also immediately download your resume in case they need to feed it to ChatGPT to review it or something like that. Jokes aside, they won't have to do this for your portfolio and your resume. Oh, and crafting a proper resume that actually goes through all of the automatic bots and checking systems is pretty tough. I've heard stories where people send their resumes to over 300 different companies, and most are just bot auto rejections because you haven't added enough quality keywords for the bot to consider you worthy. That's stupid. So, alongside building this portfolio, we also created something known as the Developer Career Accelerator, which is a part of the bundle you can get with this portfolio kit. There, we dive super deep into crafting your resume and cover letter. There are modules on first figuring out your focus for what kind of opportunities you want to rank. Then there's market research and a module about crafting your perfect developer resume, alongside with examples, best practices, and resumes you can clone and make your own. There's also more stuff about LinkedIn optimization, GitHub, README, and cover letters, as well as job learning strategies. So click the link down in the description to get this as part of the bundle with the Portfolio Starter Kit. And with that in mind, let's continue developing the other windows of our portfolio. In this lesson, we'll focus on implementing the Finder component. Yep, this beast of a cluster of different windows that allows you to switch between your work, the About Me section, resume, even trash, as well as showcase all of your projects. But before we dive into the UI of this component, we'll have to implement some logic. Yep, we'll create a second store of data, and specifically, it'll track our Finder location. In other words, it'll manage the current directory or folder context within the Finder window. So it'll track the location, such as work, about me, resume, or any other project folders, maintaining the state which represents the folder currently being viewed. The store will hold metadata about the folder structure itself and what folder you're looking at, not whatever the window is open or where it's positioned on the screen. So that means that it is separate from our use window store, which means that I'll create another file within the store folder and I'll call it location.js. This will be a great recap of learning how Zustand and global state management work. So first things first, we'll create a new use location store. And I'll make that equal to create, coming from Zustand, within which we can pass the immer call, which is coming from Zustand middleware, and then it gets access to a state creator function, where we get access to the set function, and then we can just automatically return an object of our state. And that's a lot of parentheses, but if you understand what's happening, that's good. Within here, you can just define different properties, such as the current active location, which at the start we can set to the default location, which is going to be equal to locations, coming from constants, .work. Now, this locations look like this. It is nothing more than a simple object specifying the data about different locations. It can be work, about, resume, and trash, and it looks something like this. Each one of these locations has an ID, a type, a name, icon, kind, which is the folder in this case, and then children, such as in this work folder, we have a couple of projects, and each one of these will have additional information, such as a Nike e-commerce application, its icon, its kind, position, and where we're going to display it, as well as it can also have its own children. This will start making more sense as we see it on the screen, and yes, you'll be able to modify every single part of your portfolio. So right here at the top, I will define this as a default location Since it's a constant, I'm using capital letters, and I'll set it to locations.work, and then we can set the active location to the default location right here. Then I'll create a function called setActiveLocation, which will take in a location. By default, it can be set to null, and it'll call the set function, where we get access to the state, and we modify the state.activeLocation to be equal to the new location that we're setting it to. Pretty straightforward, right? Then we also want to have a resetActiveLocation function that's not going to accept any props. It'll also call the setter, and it'll set the active location back to the default location. And that's it. This store was much simpler than the other one. So I will now export default location store. And you might wonder, was it really necessary to separate the Windows store from the location store? Well, the use Windows store manages the window concerns, whether windows are opened, closed, their z-index, position, and animation states. It controls the application's Windows lifecycle and visual layering on the desktop. In contrast, the location store manages content state, the hierarchical navigation within Finder. These represent two fundamentally different domains. They're different concerns. As I said, Windows Store is all about figuring out, is this window open and which window is on top, while the location store handles what folder am I currently viewing. These two concerns shouldn't be tightly coupled. Another reason why I decided to separate them is that the location context, such as which property we clicked on, needs to persist across window operations. So when you close or reopen the Finder window, I still want to remain on the last position we were on. And that's another reason why having them separate is good. Another reason why it's good to separate them is that the location store will be used by some other components in the future. For example, you might want to pin one of these project folders on home screen or your About Me section. And finally, it's great for scalability, because if you later need to add the breadcrumb navigation, search filtering, or location history, having a dedicated store makes this cleaner. The Windows Store stays focused on window management without being polluted with the navigation logic. That's it for the Use Location Store. In the next lesson, we'll use it within our new, most powerful window of the app, the Finder. To get started creating the Finder, go ahead and create a new window within the Windows folder and call it finder.jsx. You can run RAFCE and very quickly import it and export it within your index. I'll simply rename this to Finder and then export it right here at the bottom. Then we can import it directly within the app.jsx. Right below the resume, I'll simply say Finder and import it from Windows. Now you'll be able to see a little Finder thingy right here. So let's develop it. Right within it, I'll start by wrapping everything in an empty React fragment, as what we've done so far. Then within it, I'll render a div that'll have an ID set to the window header. Within it, I think you already know, we'll have window controls coming from components. And then we'll also give it a target set to Finder, so we know that we're closing the Finder if we click on the close button. I'll also render a search icon right here coming from Lucid React with a class name of icon. That'll look something like this. But of course, we want to wrap it into a window wrapper. So right here at the bottom, I will say const Finder window is equal to window wrapper. We will wrap the Finder component and choose a key for our window. And then we'll simply export the Finder window. So once we use it within the app, once you click on the portfolio, it'll open up a new window, which soon enough will act as the Finder. Right below this div for the window header, we'll create another div. This one will have a class name of BG White, Flex, and H-Full. Right within it, I'll render another div with a class name set to sidebar, and within the sidebar, another div within which we'll have an H3 that'll say favorites, and below it, a UL within which we have to render a list of all of our favorites. I will also duplicate this div right here, but the second time it'll not say favorites, rather it'll say work. So this is what we're trying to replicate. We want to have some links for our favorites and then the work, which is going to be our portfolio. So right within this first UL, what you can do is run object.values so we can extract only the values out of the locations coming from constants. That's going to be just work location, about location, resume location, trash location, and so on. Then you want to map over them. So say dot map, you get each item, and then for each one, you want to automatically return a list item. That list item will have a key equal to item.id. It'll have an on click where we can set the active location. That set active location is coming from the location store. So right here, you can say const destructure the active location as well as the set active location. And this will be coming from use location store. Then within this on click, you can simply define a callback function and then call the set active location by passing in the item, which in this case is the location. Then within it, you can render an image that'll have a source of item.icon with a class name of w-4 and an alt of item.name. And then below the image, we'll render a p tag with a class name of text-sm, font-medium, and truncate. Finally, I'll render the item.name within it. And now you can see work, about me, resume, trash, and so on. Now, we also have to figure out which one of these is currently active. And we can do that by adding an additional class name to this li. To be able to add dynamic class names using Tailwind, there's a neat little package called CLSX. So what you can do is open up your terminal and run npmi CLSX like this, class names. And then right here within the class name, instead of making it a regular string, you can open up curly braces, call the CLSX library, which you have to import from CLSX, and then you can define when you want to apply which class. In this case, if the item.id is triple equal to the current active location.id, then we want to apply a class of active, else we'll apply not active. If I save this, this will be better. Oh, but it looks like I applied this class name to the image instead of the li, so I'll provide it to the li right here. And now if you open it up, you can see the work is currently turned on and you can switch between different locations. And now we can do basically the same thing for the work section right here for the projects. Go ahead and copy this entire UL and paste it right below. Only this time, instead of mapping over our locations, we'll be mapping over the children of those locations. And that'll look like this, locations.work.children. So these are our projects, and that'll look something like this. Now, this is a lot of repetitive code. We just duplicated it. And to really see what's duplicated, you can expand it right here, and you can see that this entire part, besides the value that we're mapping over, is basically duplicated from the start of the map to the end of the map. That means that we want to extract that part above. So I will copy the .map part all the way to the end and remove it from here. Then, right at the top of the return, we'll say const render list. And it'll take in an array of items, and it'll automatically return those items, and then we can paste the map that we had. So it'll simply map over them, whichever items we pass as a prop, and it'll render this. Now, why is this useful? Because now, right here, where we said object values locations, you can simply pass that as a prop that will map over and display all of that. Render list. But make sure to properly close it. It ends with 2 parentheses. Once you do that, you'll see that we'll basically have the same thing, which is good, but we can take it a step further and also remove this part right here. The only thing we care about is the actual data, that will pass over to our render list, just like this. So as you can see, the final product looks exactly the same as before. We can click between different things, but now the actual JSX part of the code is significantly cleaner and makes so much more sense. As a matter of fact, I'm noticing now that this part is also the same, including the UL. So if you really want to take it a step further, and in this case, I'll show you how we do that, is you can copy the rest of the part, so the div and the h3. We will return it right here. So I will put an immediate return, div h3. This will be actually the name of the list. So I'll say name. So here you want to render the name of the list. Then we want to open up a dynamic part, wrap this in a UL because we're starting with a list, and the UL right here after the map. So I will properly close it, UL. And then I have to close the div. Hopefully I'm doing it right. And then close the parenthesis. If we save this, it's looking good. And now you can just call the render list 2 times. The first parameter is going to be the name. So in this case, favorites. And then the second parameter is the value. In this case, the first parameter is going to be work and then the value. And now you can delete everything else because this right here renders the list. And you end up with a code that looks like this. You're simply rendering 2 different lists. Everything else is right here. You can even collapse that if you wanna. And the final JSX looks like this. And what we've done here is nothing more than regular JavaScript and some React tricks. I think we cover a lot of that fundamental JavaScript stuff within the Complete Path to JavaScript Mastery course on JS Mastery Pro. So if you haven't already, you can become a member, and we go in depth about arrays, objects, tricky concepts, and clean code best practices. But actually, in every single one of these courses, especially Ultimate Next.js, I try to follow the best practices of proper production-ready code, and I love keeping it clean, like what we've done right here. Now, to show the actual content, we can head below these 2 divs and create another UL. This time, it'll have a class name of content, and we'll map over the active location. Okay, so this is the location we're currently on, dot children, dot map, where we get individual item. And then for each item, we want to automatically return an li with a key set to item.id, a class name set to item.position, and on click, we want to open that item. So we can simply say open item and pass in the item we want to open. This open item is a special function which I'll create right here. Open item. It'll accept the item we want to open, and then we'll implement some logic soon enough. But before we're actually opening it, let's finish how it should look like. Within the list item, the only thing we need to show is an image with a source set to item.icon, as well as an alt tag of item.name. And then below the image, we can render a p tag that will render the item.name. But it looks like I put this UL in the wrong place. It should actually be within this div next to our sidebar, not beneath it. So now if you go to work, you should be able to see 3 different projects. If you go to about me, you should be able to see some PNGs. Resume should show your resume, and trash should show some trash. As well as when you click on your work, you'll be able to see the important information, such as the text documents, the actual website, a PNG, or even a Figma design of the projects you've developed. You can think of this as your projects section. So you can even rename it to my projects or my apps. But how do we actually open these items right now? I mean, the resume at least should be simple because we already implemented the resume feature, right? So how do we open it? Well, the open item is going to be the function that determines that. So I will head over into the open item function and say, if item.file type is triple equal to PDF. That's easy then. We can just return open window. This, of course, is coming from our window state management. So we can say const destructure the use window hook. And it's coming from use window store, and we'll open the window that's called resume. We've already done that before. Oh, it's supposed to say open window, not use window. And if you do that properly, once you click on it, now you can open up your resume directly from your resume tab within your Finder. Okay, that's good. But what about opening folders? We can see the folders of your work right here. That's also easy. The only thing you have to say is if item.kind is triple equal to folder, in that case, return set active location and set it to the item that we're currently clicking on. So now if you click on Nike e-commerce, you can see that it'll open it up right here. If you click on another app that you've built, it'll open up that one. Okay, but what's the state with this Nike.com link, which is going to be the link to your deployed application or maybe the Figma file for it? For that, we can just open it up in a new window. So I'll say if an array of fig or URL dot includes the item.file type. And if that item has an href, in that case, we can return window.open item.href, and we'll open it up in a blank page, like this. So now if you click on Nike.com, you can see that for me, it opens up the Nike YouTube video. If I click on Figma, it opens up Google because I didn't yet add that link. But you get the idea. For example, the AI resume analyzer will open up that YouTube video. So this would be a good point in time where you would go through this additional data in the location store, where we have the locations, and then we have your work location. This is the most important part, where we have project 1, project 2, and project 3. You can even add more if you want to. Go over those projects, modify the names, modify the images, modify the children of those projects, and the descriptions, so this portfolio truly becomes yours and you display your work and your past projects. Once you're done with that, we can continue. We have to also create different viewers for text and image files. So right here below, if it's not either one of these 3 types, then we just want to open up a regular window that'll accept a window key of a template string, item.file type, item.kind, and we'll pass in the data for that item. If you try clicking on it, nothing will happen because we haven't yet implemented an image viewer or a text viewer. Since we are recreating this as a complete operating system, we have to code out the ability to preview or open up an image or a text file. So let's do that next. Okay, you can now browse your projects, but can you actually read more details about them? What they're all about, and can you maybe see a photo of the design or of the finished application? That's what we're going to build next. A text file viewer as well as an image viewer. Starting with text, this window will allow you to render any text file. You simply need to call the window and pass the correct data. To start working on it, this time I want to do something a bit different. Instead of us coding this new window from scratch, I want to give Juni a shot and see if it can one-shot this entire feature by understanding our current code base, figuring out how windows typically work, and then implementing this text viewer. So open up Juni and let's write a precise prompt. Build a simple text file window. Create text.jsx inside Windows folder. Use window wrapper and window store. For sure we'll need that, right? The window ID is txt file. How do I know that? Because if you head over to the window store and then you go over to window config, you'll see that for the text file, the key right here is txt file. Then we can say read windows.txtfile.data and render its name, optional image, optional subtitle, and an array of description paragraphs. Because if you think about it, what text is basically a collection of paragraphs. If no data, just return null. Then, as usual, wrap the component with window wrapper, as we've done with other windows. Then export it from Windows index.js and import it in app.jsx. I should be able to open any text file from Finder and see this window display its content. I think this is good enough. Feel free to pause and type it out if you want on your own. Or once it's done, you can actually code it out on your own. That's totally okay. Maybe you can take the time and try to see if it can be faster than Junie while implementing this feature. It'll now get the structure of window.js, get the structure of index.js and other files that it thinks might be relevant for this task, and it'll update us on the task progress. It seems like it's already understanding what it needs to do. It identified the window store. Now it needs to locate the window config. Once it does that, it went into the Finder to figure out how that works. Then it's searching for the window wrapper. It's opening up all the windows so it understands how we're typically wrapping them with a window. There we go, confirmed wrapper approach across windows, ready to implement text window and wire it up. Preparing to wire text window by ensuring controls. And there we go, it started editing. It created a new file called text.jsx, implementing a text window component with dynamic content rendering. It exported it, and then it imported it within app.jsx. And there we go. That's it. So let's go ahead and check it out together. Right here, we have a new component called text.jsx. For consistency, I can rename it to use a capital letter T at the start, and then we can start going through it together. So it's importing the window wrapper and properly wrapping it right here, while giving it the key of txt file. That's good. Then it's getting access to the windows from the Windows store and the data coming from windows.textfile.data. If there's no data, it returns null. Otherwise, it destructures all the properties from the data, including the name, image, subtitle, and description. It nicely renders the window header and applies a target so we can close it, renders the name of this window. Then within this div, it checks whether an image exists, and if it does, it renders it. So let's see if that actually works. Oh, but first, let me see if it actually exported it properly. Looks like it did. Text coming from text, and then whether it imported it within the app. And looks like it did that correctly too. So the only thing that's remaining to check is to see whether it actually works. I'll head over to a Nike project and click on this txt. And would you look at that? It actually did it. We have this text right here, Nike e-commerce. It renders it properly, and this is coming from the information about that specific project. So if you modified it, you should be able to see something else. Some of these, I think, also have images. Not the projects, but if you head over to About Me section, there's the About Me txt, where I included an image. So if you've never seen my face, hi, I'm Adrian. And here you can see that we're also rendering an image within the text file, as well as some emojis. It's looking good to me. If something's not working perfectly for you, you can just pause this video, check what's maybe different for you, fix it up, and then you'll also have your text reader within your macOS portfolio. Pretty cool that Junie was able to do it so quickly. Now, the second type of a file is an image. Right now, we cannot open up this PNG right here. So feel free to pause this video and try to implement the image viewer on your own. What I'll do is give Junie another shot. I'll just continue the conversation right here and just tell it to create an image file window, just like the text window. It should render the title and the image coming from image URL and press enter. Now, this challenge is significantly harder for Junie because I gave it less information to work with. So let's see how well it does. Oh, this was super quick. It looks like it already edited the image.jsx file. So while it's continuing to do the rest, let's go ahead and check it out. Here it is. It looks like it exported it and imported it within the app, exactly as I asked. And there we go. It looks like it's done. Our image looks like this. It once again renders the window header with the name of the file. Then it renders the image right here and wraps it within a window wrapper. So back within our application, if you try to open up a file, it actually does it. This is amazing. You can now head over to the About Me section and let's check it out. Oh, this was me on the conference. Or we can check out some additional designs right here for this Nike website we've done not that long ago on YouTube. Maybe this food delivery app as well. And what do we have in the trash? It looks like a hero section of a typical boring portfolio. I guess that's why it's in the trash. Because what you have here is something much, much better. You can open up different images, different kinds of files, check out your work. And I mean, as we're continuing to build this, it's becoming such a nice and powerful portfolio application. We're getting close to the end, but I think we're missing something. I'll tell you what that is in the next lesson, but for now, great job on coming this far into the course. Having a great portfolio is amazing, and once recruiters and potential employers see what you've built with all of these different windows, they're gonna ask, hey, how can I actually reach out to you? Where's the contact info? Thankfully for that, we have this hyperlink right here at the top, as well as the contact section at the bottom. So let's go ahead and implement the contact section window. To implement it, you can head over to your Windows and create a new file called contact.jsx. You can run RAFCE right here. And I love how we're calling these windows and not just sections of the page. Then we can export it within this index right here. That'll be called a contact. And finally, export it and import it within the app.jsx so we can actually show it on the screen. Head over into it, and we can get started implementing it. As usual, we'll wrap it in an empty React fragment, within which we're going to have a div that'll act as, you know it, a window header. So I'll give it an ID of window header, and within it, an h2 that'll say contact me. We must wrap it in a window wrapper. So say const contact window is equal to window wrapper, and pass in the contact component as well as the window key, and then simply export default contact window. Then you can open it up. So to implement it, right below this div, create another div that'll have a class name of padding of 5 and the space y of 5 as well to create some spacing. Within it, you can display an image of source, and you'll have to find it in your images folder. In this case, I have an image of me. It's adrian.jpg. This is the image from the GitHub Stars Walk of Fame at the GitHub Universe conference in San Francisco. I'll also give it an alt tag of Adrian. You can put, of course, your name right here, and a class name of W20, and rounded -full to make this appear like a little avatar. Then below it, I'll render an H3 that'll say something along the lines of let's connect. Below it, a P tag of got an idea, a bug to squash, or just wanna talk tech. I'm in. You can write something like that or what works for you. Then right below it, render a UL. Within it, map over your socials. These socials are coming from constants, of course, so we can keep things separated. And the only thing you have to replace here are the links. Currently, these links are pointing to my platform's Twitter and LinkedIn profiles. You want to modify these to suit your social profiles. Say socials.map, where you get each individual social profile that has an ID, a BG, a link, an icon, and a text. And we can automatically return an li for each one of these with a key set to ID, a style set to background color of BG, and then within it, render an anchor tag. Within anchor tag, add an image that has a source of icon, an alt of text, and a class name of size-5. And below the image, render a P tag that renders the text. This will give you the cards of GitHub, platform, Twitter, and LinkedIn. Of course, you can modify all of these and point to your other profiles if you want to. And to actually make them clickable, give an href of link to this anchor tag, give it a target of _blank so it opens up on new screen. When you give it a blank, you also have to give it a rel of no opener, no referrer, and give it a title of text. So now if you click on GitHub, it'll lead you to my GitHub profile. Same thing for the platform, which leads you to jsmastery.com. And then there's Twitter and LinkedIn. Oh, looks like I forgot to add the buttons to close the window. That is the window controls coming from components. Index is not necessary, so we can remove it. And we can close it and give it a target of contact. There we go, that's better. And that's it. Now, it's very easy to contact you. There's a link at the top, or there's this contact section right here at the bottom. So while they're browsing your portfolio, if they want to quickly contact you, they can just click right here and do it right away. What would be useful is also adding another p tag to just drop in your email, jsmastery.pro. That way, if they want to, they can quickly send you an email. This one was super quick, but that's because we've already built such great fundamentals from the window wrappers, window controls, and proper constants that makes all of this super simple because we're reusing our app's primary functionalities. That's how real development is supposed to look like. As you build your app, it should get easier, not harder. But it's been some time since we've reviewed our code. Yes, we've had a couple of easier components, but that doesn't mean that a couple of errors didn't snuck through. So what we'll do is we'll just call CodeRabbit to check it out. The only thing you have to do is type CodeRabbit in your terminal. It'll recognize all the changes we've done, which is really a lot, and you can press enter so that we awaken the code review demons. This might take some time because there's so many changes, but as soon as it analyzes the first couple of files, it'll give them to us so we can start checking out the review. And it looks like the review is in, and there's one potential issue. Risky default parameters could lead to a null state. Setting location to null as the default parameter means that calling setActiveLocation without arguments will set ActiveLocation to null. This could break components that expect a valid location object. For example, Finder on line 57 uses ActiveLocation.children, and it gives us a couple of approaches. First, if there's no location, we can just return or require the parameter explicitly. I love how it found this, and it actually referred to the part of the code where this is specifically going to break if something goes wrong. So I'll use this prompt to fix it with AI by pressing the letter C, opening up Junie, and pasting it right here. That should fix it for me without me even having to worry about where it is in the code. Of course, it's always great to know what's actually happening, but thankfully, for that reason, you get a diff so you can see what happens. We are removing the location null, which means that now we are requiring an explicit argument, ignoring the undefined calls, and here we're adding a line where we say if location is undefined, then return. This is great. And I'll go ahead and do a push by running git add dot git commit -m, implement many features, and git push. Perfect. Not much more left to go, but I hope you're excited as I am to finish up this portfolio. Okay, we're almost at the end of this course, but our desktop looks pretty empty. Sure, we have this top bar right here, we have a nice hero animated text, and we have a dock that opens up all sorts of different windows, but there's nothing on the desktop. So let's add some folders. The most important folders, of course, being our work projects. So we'll put shortcuts to them directly on our desktop. It's no different than what we did inside the Finder. You'll follow the same steps by rendering these project folders at different locations on the desktop. And then when you click on it, it'll open up the window with the specified location. See, this is exactly why we had to create that use location store. Because whenever someone clicks on any of these folders, we'll call this store and set the location to be that directory and then open the Finder window. So go ahead and create a new component file. This is not really a window, it's just a component. That'll be called home.jsx. You can run rafce, very easily import and export it within our index.js. That'll be called home and home right here. And then back within the app, you can now just add it at the bottom. Home. Coming from components. So head over into it and let me show you how we can implement it. First things first, I'll turn this div into a section that'll have an ID set to home. Then within it, I'll create a new unordered list within which we want to map over our projects. But what are those projects and where are they coming from? Well, they're simply different locations within our Finder. So right here at the top, I will say const projects is equal to locations coming from constants dot work question mark dot children. And if that doesn't exist, we'll simply render an empty array just so our app doesn't break. Then we can map over the projects by saying projects.map, where you get each individual project. And for each one, we render a list item that has a key equal to project.id. And within it, we'll render an image with a source set to /images /folder.png. So we'll use the folder image for all of these different icons. Now you can see one folder appear right here, but it's not yet draggable. And I also want to render a p tag that'll render the project name. So now you can see they all appear one on top of another. What we want to do next is give this image an alt tag so it doesn't complain. So alt will be set to project.name. And then we have to give this li a class name to properly position it on the screen. We'll use CLSX to apply dynamic class names, and I'll give it class name of group as well as folder. We'll use this word folder to target it with GSAP and make it draggable. But before we do that, as the second parameter to CLSX, I'll say project.window position. This will change the default position of the window. Where did that come from? Well, if you head over to locations, .work, .children, and then see one of these projects, you'll see that it has a window position and you can play with it. Instead of top 15 VH, you can set that to top 30 VH, or maybe top 50 VH. Or you can change the right position to maybe right 30, or right 100, or 1000. Or you can just leave it at the positions that I set it. I set it so that it appears that they're randomly positioned on the screen. And the last thing we have to do is to make them draggable. So just use the use GSAP hook, define a callback function with an empty dependency array, and just say draggable dot create, and then say dot folder, which means that our folder class name will become draggable. But for this to work, make sure to import draggable coming from GSAP draggable, and now you can move them around, and it feels so seamless and smooth. You can see they even stack one on top of another, so it behaves like a real operating system. This is amazing. I'll store them right here at the top. And finally, we have to be able to open them. Of course, you know that that's super simple because we've already implemented the use Windows Store. So I'll say const and destructure the open window functionality coming from use Windows Store. So now what we can do is once we click on it, we can create a new function called handle open project finder, where we'll pass in the project and then simply open up the window. So open window and then pass in the project. Of course, we'll have to call this handle project open window as an on-click to the li. So on-click, handle open project finder, and pass in the project. So now if you click on it, nothing will happen yet. That's because we first have to set the location of the window. Thankfully, our other store helps with that. So we'll simply destructure the set active location coming from use location store. And then alongside opening the window, or rather before opening it, we want to set active location to the project. And what we want to open is actually the Finder window that'll then display that location. So now if we click on it, you can see it opens the Nike e-commerce, or maybe the food delivery app, or the AI resume analyzer. This is perfect and works like a charm. It just adds another layer to a portfolio where you can now hover over the hero, but you can also interact with the folders and open them up, which kind of invites you to start exploring the rest of the portfolio and finally contact you to give you a job. So great job on implementing the homepage folders. And I mean, just look at how far you've already come. starting from a simple navigation bar to building a smooth text animation and a macOS-style dock, draggable windows, and so much more to showcase your portfolio content. You've learned a lot so far, but it only truly sticks when you practice it yourself, because real learning happens when you get hands-on, not when you just copy and paste from a tutorial. So pause for a moment, review what you've built, go through the codebase and try to truly understand how the use Windows Store works, how the use Location Store works, and most importantly, how the window wrapper higher order component works. These are some tricky concepts which you need to fully understand. If needed, ask Junie. Junie can help you fully understand different parts of your code. Simply ask what you want to know if you need additional info. Once you make sure that you fully understand the entirety of the codebase, I prepared a little challenge for you, and that is to implement the last window of the day, the gallery. Not every portfolio really needs a gallery, but if you want to display some of your projects or some images, you can definitely do that right here. It's simply a list of photos where clicking on one opens it up in a new photo window, which we already built. It's pretty straightforward, familiar, and totally within your skills. So if you want to add this within your portfolio, go ahead and give it a shot. I'm sure you already know that you most likely have to create another window within the window folder, and you can call it photos.jsx. You'll then need to export it right here by saying import photos coming from Windows, and then exporting it right here. And then you can import it within the app. Right here above the home, you can add the photos. And the photos component itself will look something like this. You already know that it starts with a window header. We'll use the open window functionality from the Windows Store. And then we're simply mapping over the photo links, which display these icons on the left. And finally, mapping over the gallery, which uses the open window functionality to open up each one of these images, exactly as I've showed right here. So if you want to implement it, feel free to pause the screen and code it out. The only thing that's remaining is to deploy this portfolio to the internet so that your friends, potential employers, and clients can check it out and be amazed with what you've done. To do that, you can head back over to your code base. If you've been using GitHub, you can push all the latest changes by running git add dot, git commit -m, finalize portfolio, and git push. Once that is done, simply run npm run build, which will create an optimized production build of your application. And it'll give it to you right here within your folder. You can just right-click it and open it in Finder or File Explorer. Once you open it there, you'll see a folder called dist. Now you can head back over to your project on Hostinger, go to the dashboard of the selected project, and head over to the file manager. Right here, it says do not upload here, so don't do that. Rather, head over into the public HTML, delete the default PHP, head over into the dist folder, and drag and drop everything from it to the public HTML. We have a couple of assets, so it might take about a minute. But once it's there, you can head back over to your project and click on the domain name you've chosen. And just like that, your portfolio is right here. Same as what you had on your local machine, but this time in just a couple of clicks, deployed on the internet and live for everybody to check out. Now the world will be able to browse your projects, check out your resume, or wait, no, it looks like it failed to load it. So let's go ahead and quickly fix that. Back within the code, you can head over to your resume file, and here we're importing some workers. The issue is happening right now because React PDF requires the PDF.js worker to be downloaded by the browser. Locally, we just import the URL and it works. But on the deployed version, Node modules is not publicly served, so it's not gonna work. So to fix it, we have to modify our worker config. We'll say PDF.js global worker options dot worker source is equal to, and now we'll craft a new URL to a publicly accessible worker. It'll be a template string of https ://unpackaged.com. And here we can find that worker. This is a fast CDN that allows you to find anything. You just have to know what you're looking for. In this case, we're looking for a pdf.js-dist at, and now we have to define the pdf.js version. So I'll say pdf.js.version/build/pdf.worker.minified.mjs. Now it should be able to find the worker even in production and make it work. Go ahead and rerun npm run build, open up the folder in Finder one more time, and back within Hostinger's public HTML, simply drag and drop all these new files to override the current code. Once it's done, you can head back over to your portfolio and reload. Then let's go to the Finder, and now everybody will be able to view and download your portfolio. Yep, now it works like a charm. Great job. And yeah, here we are. If you're still here, first of all, congratulations. You've already done something 99% of developers never do. You built a real, animated, interactive system from scratch. And that's a skill most juniors never show, even if they technically know React. So here's the thing. Now that you can build something this polished, the next question is, can you present yourself in a way that actually gets you noticed? Because the truth is, you don't have a skills problem. Most developers don't. They have a presentation problem. Recruiters see hundreds of similar portfolios. Same stack, same projects, same vibe. What makes you stand out isn't just the code. It's how your work feels, how it moves and looks. That's why, alongside building this macOS portfolio and making it your own, I want you to focus on the strategy side of things. Not just the codes, but rather how to position yourself, build a standout GitHub and LinkedIn, write a resume that gets replies, and prepare for real interviews. And that's exactly what I teach inside the Dev Career Accelerator. It's not for beginners, but it's for developers like you who already build cool things and just need the right guidance to actually land that first or next role. I'll review your portfolio, resume, GitHub, LinkedIn, everything. So you're not just guessing your way through the job search. But whether you pick up anything or not, I just want to leave you with this. You're capable of building far more than you think. You proved it in this project. So take what you've learned here and go build something the internet won't forget. I'll see you in the next one.